This video will help you sleep and relax. But before we begin, I would like to know which city you're from and what time you're watching this. Now, subscribe to the channel, relax, and let's begin. I've been fishing since I was 8 years old, when my grandfather first took me to the local pond. As an adult, fishing became my escape from the everyday grind. Just me, my thoughts, and the gentle rhythm of casting and reeling. Something about being near water has always calmed me, especially at night when everything gets quiet and still. The darkness made it feel like I had the whole world to myself. That changed 6 months ago. I still fish, but never alone and never after sunset. I can't even look at water in the dark without my heart racing. My friends think I'm being ridiculous, but they weren't there. They didn't see what I saw. It happened back in April. I'd been working overtime for weeks, dealing with a demanding client at my IT job. By Friday, I was mentally fried and needed to decompress. I decided to take my fishing gear and head out to this spot I'd discovered a couple years back, a secluded bend on the Millbrook River about 40 minutes outside town. It's off a dirt access road most people don't know about, which meant I almost always had it to myself. I finished work around 5, grabbed my gear, and was on the road by 5:30. The spot is pretty remote. You have to drive down this narrow road for about 3 miles, then park and walk another quarter-mile through the woods to reach the river. I'd fished there maybe a dozen times before, but always during the day. This would be my first night trip there. When I arrived, the sun was already setting. I parked my Civic at the little clearing that serves as a makeshift lot and hiked in, carrying my tackle box, rod, and a small cooler with some sandwiches and beers. The path was tricky to navigate as it got darker, but I had my headlamp and knew the way. The spot itself is perfect for fishing. A gentle bend in the river creates this calm pool where fish tend to gather. Across the river is nothing but dense woods that stretch for miles. No houses, no roads, nothing. Just wilderness. That night, the stars were coming out, and there was just enough moonlight to see the water's surface. The weather was mild, around 60 degrees, and everything felt peaceful. I set up my folding chair about 10 feet from the water's edge, turned on my small battery-powered lantern, and started rigging my line. The only sounds were the gentle current, some distant owls, and the occasional splash of fish jumping. I felt the tension from work melting away with each passing minute. For the first couple of hours, everything was perfectly normal. I caught 3 decent-sized bass and a catfish, throwing them all back. I was on my second beer, just enjoying the solitude and the cool night air. Around 10:30, I think, is when things started to feel different. I can't explain exactly how it started. It was just this gradual feeling that something had changed. At first, I thought maybe the temperature had dropped or the wind had picked up, but that wasn't it. It was more like the atmosphere itself had shifted. The peaceful feeling was gone, replaced by something I couldn't identify. Then I realized what it was. I felt like I was being watched. I've been in the woods enough to know that feeling. Usually it means there's a deer or maybe a coyote nearby, curious but cautious. I turned my headlamp on and scanned the trees behind me. Nothing there. I shined it across the river into the woods on the opposite bank. Again, nothing obvious, just trees and darkness beyond the reach of my light. I tried to shake it off, told myself it was just my imagination working overtime after too many horror movies. I cast my line again and tried to focus on fishing, but the feeling wouldn't go away. If anything, it got stronger, like a physical weight pressing on me. Around 11:15, I heard it, rustling sounds from across the river. Not the normal forest sounds I was used to. These were too deliberate, too heavy. My first thought was maybe a deer or even a bear, but something about the rhythm seemed wrong. Too consistent, too purposeful. I aimed my light toward the sound, but couldn't see anything. The tree line across the river was about 50 yards away, and my headlamp wasn't powerful enough to penetrate deep into the woods. The rustling stopped whenever I pointed my light in that direction, which only made it creepier. By 11:30, the sounds had changed. They weren't rustling anymore. They were footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps moving through the underbrush. I called out, "Hello? Someone there?" My voice sounded thin and nervous even to my own ears. No response, just those methodical footsteps getting closer to the river's edge. I stood up, my heart hammering in my chest. I aimed my light across the river again, sweeping it back and forth along the opposite bank. That's when I saw it, a figure standing at the tree line, just standing there, completely still, watching me. At first I thought maybe it was another fisherman, though that made no sense given how remote this spot was. "Hey!" I called out. "You okay over there?" The figure didn't move or respond. It just stood there, a dark silhouette against the slightly less dark background of the trees. I couldn't make out any features, just a tall, thin shape that was unmistakably human. "Hello?" I tried again, my voice cracking slightly. "Can I help you with something?" Still nothing, just that silent, unmoving figure staring across the water at me. I felt my mouth go dry and my palms start to sweat. Something was very wrong here. This wasn't some lost hiker or fellow fisherman. I started packing up my gear, keeping my eyes on the figure. That's when it moved. Not back into the woods, as I'd hoped, but forward, toward the river's edge. Its movements were stiff and awkward, almost like it wasn't used to walking. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped my tackle box, spilling hooks and lures across the ground. "I'm just leaving, man," I called out, trying to sound calm but failing miserably. "The spot's all yours." The figure reached the water's edge and then did something that made my blood run cold. It started wading into the river, toward me. The Millbrook isn't huge, but it's about 30 feet across at that point, and the current is strong enough that crossing it on foot would be challenging, especially in the dark. But this person just walked straight in, seemingly unaffected by the current. No hesitation, no searching for a shallow point, just a steady, deliberate advance through water that should have at least slowed it down. As it reached the middle of the river, my headlamp finally illuminated it clearly, and what I saw still haunts my nightmares. It looked like a man, but wrong in ways I struggle to describe. Tall and gaunt, with limbs that seemed slightly too long for its body. Its clothes, what looked like a dark shirt and pants, were filthy and tattered. But it was the face that made me freeze in terror. That face was pale and drawn, with sunken cheeks and dark circles under its eyes. But the eyes themselves, they were just empty. Not literally empty sockets, but might as well have been. There was no life in them, no emotion, nothing human at all. They were like black holes that seemed to be looking right through me. The worst part was its expression, or lack thereof. It wasn't angry or threatening. It wasn't anything. Just this blank, dead stare fixed directly on me as it moved steadily closer. I couldn't move. It was like my feet were cemented to the ground. The thing was about 15 feet from the bank on my side when my survival instinct finally kicked in. I abandoned most of my gear, grabbing only my rod because it was in my hand. As I backed away, it emerged from the water. It should have been dripping wet, but somehow the water seemed to slide off it unnaturally, like oil off Teflon. It didn't make a sound, no breathing, no footsteps, nothing, as it came up the bank. I don't know what made me do it, but I swung my fishing rod at it like a whip. The heavy lure at the end caught it in the face, and it recoiled slightly, the first real reaction I'd seen from it. It gave me just enough time to turn and run toward the path back to my car. I've never run so fast in my life. Branches whipped at my face, and I tripped twice on exposed roots, but I barely felt it. All I could think about was getting away from whatever was behind me, because it was behind me. I could hear it now, crashing through the underbrush, moving faster than seemed possible given its awkward gait by the river. The quarter-mile path seemed to stretch on forever. My lungs were burning, and my legs felt like rubber, but pure adrenaline kept me going. I could hear it gaining on me, getting closer with each second. When I finally broke through the trees to the clearing where my car was parked, I fumbled with my keys, my hands shaking violently. I could hear it at the edge of the woods now, maybe 50 feet behind me. I got the door open and threw myself inside, locking it immediately. As I was jamming the key into the ignition, it emerged from the trees. In the dim light of the small clearing, it looked even more unnatural, moving with a jerky, puppet-like gait that no human would have. It reached my car just as the engine turned over. Its face appeared at my window, those hollow eyes now filled with something I can only describe as hunger. It pressed its hands against the glass, long, pale fingers splayed out like spiders. Then it started pounding, not with anger, but with this mechanical persistence, like it would continue indefinitely until the glass gave way. The window actually started to crack. I threw the car into reverse, almost hitting a tree as I backed up, then shifted to drive and floored it down the dirt road. In my rearview mirror, I could see it standing in the clearing watching my taillights disappear. Then it started to follow, moving with that same jerky but relentless pace. I drove like a maniac down that dirt road, then hit the highway going well over the speed limit. I didn't slow down until I reached a gas station about 15 miles away, bright with fluorescent lights and with several people fueling up despite the late hour. I parked under the brightest light I could find and just sat there, trembling and trying to make sense of what had happened. I didn't report it to the police. What would I say? That I was chased by some inhuman thing that walked through a river to get to me. That would have earned me a breathalyzer test and nothing more. I drove home when the sun came up, and I haven't been back to that spot since. I left most of my gear behind, about $300 worth of equipment, but nothing could make me go back there to retrieve it. I've tried to rationalize what happened. Maybe it was just some homeless person with mental health issues. Maybe I was more tired than I realized, and my mind played tricks on me. But deep down, I know what I saw wasn't human, at least not anymore. I still fish sometimes, but only at public spots in broad daylight with other people around. I can't stand being near water in the dark. Even taking a shower with the bathroom lights dimmed makes me anxious. The thing that keeps me up at night isn't just the memory of those hollow eyes or that inhuman movement. It's the question of what would have happened if it had caught me, and the certainty I feel bone deep that whatever was chasing me that night is still out there, wading through dark waters, looking for someone else alone in the night. I'm still trying to make sense of what happened that night 3 weeks ago. I haven't been able to sleep properly since, and I've been crashing on my buddy's couch in the city because I can't bring myself to go back to Ravenswood. I need to write this down. Maybe someone here has experienced something similar and can help me understand. I graduated college back in May with a useless liberal arts degree and a mountain of debt. After sending out about 100 resumes with no luck, I was desperate for any job I could find. That's when I saw the ad for overnight delivery drivers at Ravenswood Courier Services. The pay was decent, $22 an hour plus gas compensation, and the job seemed straightforward enough. I'd always been a night owl anyway, so the hours didn't bother me. The interview with Walter Griffin, the night manager, was brief. He was a heavy-set guy in his 50s with perpetual sweat stains under his arms and deep bags under his eyes. He glanced at my resume for maybe 10 seconds before hiring me on the spot. Looking back, I should have questioned why they were so eager to bring me on, especially when Walter mentioned they'd been having trouble keeping drivers for the overnight rural routes. But I was just relieved to have income coming in. My first shift started at 8 p.m. on a Tuesday. The courier service operated out of an old warehouse on the outskirts of town. The building itself was nothing special. Concrete floors, fluorescent lighting that buzzed constantly, and a lingering smell of cardboard and dust. Walter gave me a quick tour, showed me how to use the scanning equipment, and handed me the keys to a white van with the company logo peeling off the side. Most deliveries are pretty straightforward, he explained, while helping me load packages into the van. Just follow the GPS. Some of these rural addresses can be tricky to find, but the system's usually reliable. I noticed he kept checking his watch as we loaded the last few boxes. "You getting a late start," he muttered, more to himself than to me. "Try to be done by 4 a.m. The later it gets out there." He trailed off, then cleared his throat. "Just better to finish before dawn is all." I thought it was an odd comment, but didn't think much of it at the time. The first few hours were uneventful. I delivered packages to quiet suburban neighborhoods where most houses were already dark. The GPS took me on a logical route, and I started to think this would be the easiest money I'd ever made. Around midnight, things changed. I had covered most of the suburban deliveries, and the GPS directed me onto a series of increasingly remote country roads. The houses became farther apart, the roads narrower and more winding. The asphalt eventually gave way to gravel, and tall trees created a canopy overhead that blocked out the moonlight. My headlights caught the glint of eyes in the woods. Probably just deer or raccoons, I told myself. But something about these roads made me uneasy. The radio kept cutting out, replaced by static, and my phone showed only 1 bar of service. At around 12:30 a.m., the GPS instructed me to turn onto what seemed like little more than a dirt path. I almost missed it. There was no street sign, just a rusted mailbox with no name or number. The path twisted through dense woods for what felt like miles. My headlights barely penetrated the darkness, and branches scraped against the sides of the van. Just when I was considering turning around, the trees opened up to reveal a small clearing. In the center stood what I can only describe as the most decrepit house I've ever seen. It was a 2-story Victorian-style building that might have been impressive once, but now the paint was peeling, several windows were boarded up, and the porch sagged dangerously to one side. Despite its abandoned appearance, there was a dim light visible through one of the ground-floor windows. I double-checked the address on my scanner. This was definitely the place. The package for this address was a small, lightweight box wrapped in brown paper with no return address, just a delivery barcode. I sat in the van for a minute, debating what to do. Company policy stated that all overnight deliveries required a signature, which meant I had to approach the house. I grabbed my flashlight and the package and made my way to the front door, my boots crunching on dead leaves. The porch steps creaked ominously under my weight. Before I could knock, the door swung open, revealing a woman who looked to be in her 60s, though it was hard to tell for sure. She was rail-thin, with long gray hair that hung in tangled strands around her gaunt face. Her clothes, a faded floral dress and cardigan, looked like they hadn't been washed in weeks, but what really unnerved me were her eyes. They were pale blue, almost colorless, and seemed to look through me rather than at me. "Leon Parker," she said, her voice surprisingly clear and strong. A chill ran down my spine. I hadn't introduced myself, and my name tag only had L. Parker printed on it. "I've got a package for Eliza Thorne," I managed to say, my voice cracking slightly. She smiled, revealing yellowed teeth. "That's me, dear. I've been waiting for this." She took the package with bony fingers and signed the electronic pad with a flourish. I expected, hoped, that would be the end of our interaction, but she didn't close the door. "Would you like to come in for some tea? It's a cold night to be out driving these roads." Every instinct told me to decline and get the hell out of there, but something about her gaze made it difficult to refuse outright. "I appreciate the offer, ma'am, but I've got a lot more deliveries to make tonight." "Just for a moment," she insisted, opening the door wider. "I have something for you, a token of appreciation for coming all the way out here." Against my better judgment, I followed her inside. The interior of the house was as neglected as the exterior, peeling wallpaper, stained carpets, and furniture covered in dust. The air smelled musty with an underlying sweetness that reminded me of rotting fruit. As we moved from the entrance hall to what must have been a living room, I noticed strange markings carved into the wooden door frames and floors. They looked like symbols of some kind, circles with lines through them, weird angular shapes, and what appeared to be stylized eyes. "Do you like my decorations?" Eliza asked, noticing my stare. "They're for protection." "Protection from what?" I asked, immediately regretting the question. She didn't answer, just disappeared through another doorway. I heard cabinets opening and closing before she returned, holding a small wooden box. It was about the size of a deck of cards and covered in the same strange symbols I'd seen on the walls. "Here," she said, pressing it into my hands. "Keep this with you, especially tonight." The box felt unusually warm, almost hot to the touch. I tried to hand it back, but she refused. "I don't need—" "You do," she interrupted, her voice suddenly stern. "Beware the shadows, Leon. They've noticed you now." That was it. I mumbled a quick thank you, shoved the box in my jacket pocket, and practically ran back to the van. As I pulled away, I glanced in my rearview mirror and saw Eliza standing in her doorway, watching me leave. Once I was back on the main road, I tried to shake off the encounter. Probably just a lonely old woman with some mental health issues, I reasoned. Rural isolation could do that to people. I tossed the box onto the passenger seat without opening it and focused on my next delivery. The GPS took me deeper into the countryside. The next house was a small cottage surrounded by a dense copse of trees. As I approached the property, I noticed something odd. The shadows cast by my headlights seemed wrong somehow, deeper than they should be, and they appeared to move slightly even when the objects casting them were stationary. I delivered the package quickly to a sleepy, middle-aged man who barely looked at me as he signed. As I walked back to the van, I had the distinct sensation of being watched. I spun around, shining my flashlight into the trees, but saw nothing. Back in the van, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. I kept checking my mirrors, convinced I could see movement in my peripheral vision. Every time I looked directly, there was nothing there, but the moment I focused on the road ahead, the shadows in the corners of my vision seemed to shift and change shape. My next stop was a large farmhouse about 15 minutes away. By the time I arrived, my nerves were shot. The property was surrounded by open fields, which should have been reassuring after the claustrophobic forest roads, but somehow made me feel more exposed. My headlights swept across the yard as I pulled in, and I swear I saw human-shaped shadows darting across the ground. Shadows without corresponding objects to cast them. The farmer who answered the door looked haunted, with bloodshot eyes and trembling hands. He snatched the package from me without a word and slammed the door in my face. As I walked back to the van, the shadows around me seemed to pulse and deepen. I broke into a run for the last few steps. The drive back to the warehouse was the longest hour of my life. The shadows in my peripheral vision grew more persistent, more clearly humanoid. At one point I could have sworn I saw a figure running alongside the van, keeping pace at 55 miles per hour. But when I turned to look, there was nothing there, just darkness. I kept checking my rearview mirror, convinced something was in the back of the van with me. The temperature seemed to drop steadily, even though the heating was on full blast. The strange wooden box on the passenger seat vibrated slightly, and I could have sworn I heard it humming. When I finally pulled into the warehouse parking lot at around 3:30 a.m., I was shaking. Walter was there, looking surprised to see me. "You finished the whole route?" he asked, checking my scanner. I nodded, unable to speak at first. Then it all came tumbling out. The strange house, Eliza Thorne, the moving shadows that seemed to follow me. I expected him to laugh it off or tell me I was imagining things. Instead, he went pale. "Shit," he muttered, running a hand through his thinning hair. "I was hoping. Look, I should have warned you about that route." "What do you mean?" He sighed heavily. "We've had problems with drivers on that route for years. Many refuse to take it after their first night. Some quit on the spot. We've had 3 drivers in the past 6 months just abandon their vans on the side of the road and walk away. And you didn't think to mention this?" I was incredulous. "We're desperate, okay? No one wants to do the overnight rural routes anymore. I thought maybe, with you being new to town, you wouldn't have heard the stories." "What stories?" I demanded. Walter looked uncomfortable. "Just local legends, nothing concrete. Some say those roads aren't normal after midnight, especially the stretch near the old Thorne property." I pulled the wooden box from my pocket. "She gave me this." Walter took a step back, refusing to touch it. "I'd get rid of that if I were you." Despite everything, I decided to give the job one more chance the following night. I needed the money, and I told myself I had just been tired, that my imagination had gotten the better of me. Big mistake. The second night was worse, much worse. The shadows didn't wait until midnight to appear. They were with me from the moment I left the warehouse, gathering in the corners of my vision, always just out of direct sight. The radio wouldn't work at all, just static and occasional whispers that sounded disturbingly like my name. When I reached Eliza Thorne's house, she was already outside, standing in the driveway. Her expression was panicked, her movements frantic. She rushed to my window before I could even turn off the engine. "You came back," she said, her voice strained. "You shouldn't have. The shadows are here. They're stronger tonight." I looked around and saw nothing but the normal darkness of the countryside. "What are you talking about?" "They've attached themselves to you now," she whispered. "I thought the box would protect you, but there are too many. You need to leave this place, Leon. Leave and never come back." As she spoke, I noticed the darkness behind her seemed to deepen and shift. For a split second, I could have sworn I saw multiple figures standing in her yard, vaguely human-shaped, but wrong somehow, too tall and thin, with limbs at odd angles. I threw the van into reverse and peeled out of there without even delivering her package. In my rearview mirror, I saw Eliza standing in the same spot, watching me go, while the shadows around her seemed to reach out like grasping hands. The rest of that night is fragmented in my memory. I remember stopping at another delivery address and seeing shadow figures circling my van. I remember a customer opening their door, taking one look at me, or maybe at what was behind me, and slamming it shut without taking their package. I remember headlights from oncoming cars that seemed to pass through solid shadow forms crossing the road. By 1 a.m., I couldn't take it anymore. I drove straight back to the warehouse, packages still in the van. Walter took one look at my face and nodded grimly. "You're done," he said. It wasn't a question. I quit on the spot. Walter wasn't surprised and told me I'd made the right choice. I left Ravenswood the next morning, driving to the city where my college buddy lives. I didn't even pack my things from my apartment, just grabbed some essentials and left. I still have the wooden box Eliza gave me. I can't bring myself to open it, but I can't seem to get rid of it either. Every time I try to throw it away, I find it back in my possession somehow, in my coat pocket, my backpack, once even under my pillow. And the shadows, they've followed me. They're not as strong here in the city with all the lights, but I see them gathering in dark corners under furniture in the space behind doors. Sometimes at night, I feel them at the foot of my bed, watching, waiting. I don't know what to do. I don't know what they want. All I know is that I took a job no one warned me about, and now I can't escape what followed me home. I never thought I'd be sharing this story with anyone. It sounds so insane that for weeks I convinced myself it was all some weird misunderstanding. But I can't shake what happened, and maybe writing it down will help me process it. Or maybe someone else has experienced something similar and can tell me I'm not losing my mind. I graduated with my community development degree last May, and after 6 months of rejections and temp jobs, I was desperate to find something in my field. When I saw the posting for a community center coordinator in a town called Whispering Pines, I jumped at it. The pay wasn't great, but it was a foot in the door, and the small-town vibe appealed to me after 4 years in a crowded city. When I drove into Whispering Pines for my interview, I was immediately charmed. It was exactly what you'd picture a small rural town to be. A main street with locally owned shops, people greeting each other by name, and this peaceful atmosphere that made the stress of job hunting melt away. The community center itself was this old, somewhat run-down 2-story building on the edge of town, surrounded by fields with woods in the distance. It had character, you know. The kind of place that tells a story. The interview went great. Victor Carson, the center's manager, was incredibly friendly, mid-50s, salt and pepper hair, with this genuine warmth that made me feel instantly welcome. He talked about how the center was the heart and soul of Whispering Pines, hosting everything from town meetings to craft fairs to youth programs. When he offered me the job on the spot, I accepted without hesitation. This past Monday was my first day. I arrived early, excited but nervous. The building looked different in the gray morning light, bigger somehow and older. Inside, the wooden floors creaked under my feet, and despite all the windows, there was this persistent dimness to the place, like the light couldn't quite reach all the corners. Victor greeted me with a firm handshake and a coffee mug with the center's logo on it. "Welcome to the family," he said, and something about the way he emphasized family stuck with me. He gave me a tour, introducing me to a few staff members who all had that same warm, welcoming demeanor. Everyone seemed genuinely thrilled that I was there. Throughout the day, Victor showed me the ropes, scheduling procedures, community programs, the budget, standard stuff. but I kept noticing how people would stop what they were doing to stare at me when they thought I wasn't looking, only to quickly smile when I turned their way. I brushed it off as curiosity about the new guy. Around 4 p.m., Victor mentioned that they had planned a welcome ceremony for me that evening. "Nothing fancy," he assured me, "just a chance for the community to meet you properly." I was touched by the gesture, if a little overwhelmed. I hadn't expected such a fuss on my first day. As 7 p.m. approached, people started streaming into the building. They brought food, casseroles, desserts, things wrapped in foil that I couldn't identify. Everyone introduced themselves with firm handshakes and intense eye contact. Their names blurred together: John, Sarah, Michael, Lisa, David. But they all seemed to already know everything about me. "We've heard so much about you, Marcus. Victor says you're exactly what we've been looking for. We've been waiting for someone like you." The ceremony was held in the large hall on the second floor. The room was lit mostly by candles, which Victor explained was a town tradition for special gatherings. About 40 people were there, standing in loose groups, talking quietly. But something felt off. There was an unusual group standing at the back, maybe 8 or 9 people wearing simple dark clothes. They didn't mingle with the others, and they all had these blank expressions, watching me with unwavering focus. When Victor called for everyone's attention, the room fell silent instantly. Not the gradual quieting you'd expect, but complete silence in a heartbeat. He gave a speech about community and belonging that seemed oddly rehearsed, with the crowd nodding in unison at certain points. Then he invited me to say a few words. I stumbled through a basic introduction, thanking everyone for the warm welcome and expressing my excitement about working with them. The whole time, I felt the stares of those people in dark clothing burning into me. One woman in particular, tall, with long dark hair pulled back in a severe bun, watched me with such intensity that I lost my train of thought twice. After I finished speaking, Victor placed his hand on my shoulder and squeezed a little too hard. "Now," he announced, "it's time for the real welcome." Several people in the crowd exchanged glances, and a few smiled in a way that made my stomach knot up. "Marcus," Victor said, his voice lower now, "we'd like you to join a smaller group of us downstairs for a more private welcome, the true welcome." Something in his tone set off alarm bells, but with everyone watching, I didn't feel like I could refuse. I followed Victor and about 15 others down the creaky stairs to a room I hadn't seen during my tour. It was at the end of a hallway, past the administrative offices and storage rooms. The door was heavy, made of dark wood, with this intricate carving that I couldn't quite make out in the dim light. Inside, the room was circular, which struck me as odd, given the building's rectangular shape. The walls were lined with shelves holding old books, glass jars filled with what looked like herbs, and objects I couldn't identify. The only light came from candles placed in a circle on the floor. Victor gestured for me to stand in the center of this circle. Everyone else took positions around me, their faces half hidden in shadow. My heart was racing now, but I tried to rationalize what was happening. Maybe this was just some quirky small-town tradition. Maybe they did this for all newcomers. Then they started chanting. It wasn't in English or any language I recognized. The sound was haunting, melodic but discordant, rising and falling in a pattern that made my skin crawl. I looked from face to face, searching for any sign that this was all an elaborate joke, but their expressions remained solemn, eyes fixed on me. The dark-haired woman I'd noticed earlier stepped forward. Up close, I could see she was older than I initially thought, maybe in her 40s, with deep-set eyes that looked almost black in the candlelight. Victor introduced her as Cassandra Reed. "The binding requires acceptance," Cassandra said, her voice surprisingly soft. She held a wooden bowl containing a thick, dark red liquid. Even in the dim light, I could see it wasn't wine. It was too viscous, too dark. "Drink," she said, holding the bowl out to me. "Bind yourself to us. Become one with whispering pines." My mouth went dry. "What is that?" I asked, my voice cracking. "It's sacred," Victor replied from behind me. "A mixture passed down through generations. It will open your mind to our ways." The group had stopped chanting, and the silence felt oppressive. Cassandra pushed the bowl toward me again, her eyes never leaving mine. "Drink," she repeated. "We've chosen you, Marcus. We've been waiting for you." I took a step back, bumping into someone behind me. Hands gripped my shoulders, steadying me but also holding me in place. Panic surged through me, sharp and cold. "I don't want to drink that," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I appreciate the welcome, but I'm not comfortable with this." Cassandra's expression hardened. "It's not optional," she said. "The binding must occur tonight." The people around me began closing in, the circle tightening. Victor appeared at my side, his earlier warmth completely gone. "You don't understand what we're offering you, Marcus," he said. "This is an honor. Not everyone is deemed worthy." I tried to back away again, but the hands on my shoulders tightened painfully. The chanting resumed, louder now, more urgent. Cassandra raised the bowl to my lips, and I caught a metallic smell that made my stomach lurch. That's when the door burst open. Kevin Mitchell stood in the doorway. I recognized him from earlier. He'd been introduced as the center's maintenance manager, a lanky guy with glasses who'd barely spoken to me. But now his face was flushed, his eyes wide with urgency. "Fire!" he shouted. "There's a fire in the upstairs storage room!" For a split second, no one moved. Then Victor spun toward the door. "Everyone stay calm," he ordered, but there was an edge to his voice that hadn't been there before. As the group's attention shifted to Victor, Kevin lunged forward, grabbed my arm, and yanked me toward the door. "Run," he hissed in my ear. "Now!" I didn't think twice. We bolted into the hallway and sprinted toward the exit. Behind us, I heard shouts and the sound of footsteps, but Kevin pulled me through a side door I hadn't noticed before, out into the cool night air. "My car's over there," Kevin gasped, pointing to an old Honda parked in the shadows beyond the main lot. "We need to move fast." We ran across the grass, the sound of our breathing drowned out by my pounding heart. I glanced back once to see figures emerging from the building, but they were looking toward the main parking area, not in our direction. Kevin practically shoved me into his car before jumping into the driver's seat and peeling out of there, headlights off until we hit the main road. My hands were shaking so badly, I couldn't even fasten my seatbelt. "What the hell was that?" I demanded once I found my voice. What were they trying to do to me? Kevin's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. "There's no fire," he said. "I made that up to get you out of there." "I figured that much," I said. "But what was happening? Who are these people?" He glanced at me, then focused back on the dark road ahead. "They're not who you think they are. The community center is just a front. Has been for years." "A front for what?" Kevin was silent for a moment. "A cult," he said finally. "There's no other word for it. They call themselves the Guardians of the Pine. They believe this area is sacred ground, that they're protecting some kind of ancient power, and they're always looking for new members." My mind was reeling. But they seemed so normal during the day. Everyone in town. "Not everyone in town is involved," Kevin cut in. "Maybe half. The rest either don't know or pretend not to. And yes, they're good at seeming normal. That's how they operate. They integrate themselves into the community, make themselves essential. The center runs legitimate programs, helps people, builds trust. What was in that bowl? I asked, not sure I wanted to know. Kevin's expression darkened. I don't know exactly. Some kind of mixture they use in their rituals. Blood is part of it. Animal blood, mostly, I think. But there are rumors. He trailed off and I didn't press him. My stomach was already turning. How do you know all this? I asked instead. Are you one of them? Kevin's laugh was bitter. No. I grew up here. My parents joined when I was a kid. I pretended to go along with it because I didn't have anywhere else to go. But I've been trying to get evidence, to get someone to investigate them. We drove in silence for several miles. I kept checking the rearview mirror, sure we were being followed, but the road behind us remained dark and empty. Eventually, we reached a small town I didn't recognize. Kevin pulled into the parking lot of a 24-hour diner. We should be safe here for now, he said. I need to make a call. There's someone who might be able to help us. Inside, he directed me to a booth in the back while he went to use the payphone near the bathrooms. I ordered coffee from a tired-looking waitress, but couldn't bring myself to drink it when it arrived. My hands were still shaking, and every time the diner door opened, I flinched. Kevin returned about 20 minutes later with a man in a police uniform. The officer was older, heavy-set, with a gray mustache and serious eyes. This is Officer Thomas Bennett, Kevin introduced us. He's from Millfield, the next county over. He's been interested in what's going on in Whispering Pines for a while. Officer Bennett slid into the booth across from me. Kevin's told me some of what happened tonight, he said. I'd like to hear your version if you're up to it. I told him everything, from my job interview to the bizarre ceremony. As I spoke, Bennett took notes, occasionally asking for clarification. When I finished, he sighed heavily. We've had suspicions about that place for years, he admitted. Reports of strange activities, people going missing temporarily and coming back, different. But we've never had enough to justify an investigation, and Whispering Pines isn't in our jurisdiction. Their local sheriff is, well, let's just say he's not interested in hearing anything negative about the community center. So, what do we do now? I asked. First, you need to get somewhere safe, Bennett said. Do you have friends or family nearby you can stay with? I shook my head. I just moved here for the job. My apartment's in Whispering Pines. Bennett frowned. That's not a good idea. They know where you live, and after tonight, they'll be watching for you. The reality of my situation hit me all at once. I'd quit my previous job, signed a lease, moved all my belongings to a town that apparently harbored a cult that had tried to, what? Convert me? Sacrifice me? I didn't even know. I'll help you get your things tomorrow, Officer Bennett promised. With Kevin's statement and yours, I might be able to convince my captain to open an investigation. But for tonight, I think you should get a motel room here in Millfield. That night in the motel was the longest of my life. Every noise made me jump, and I kept replaying the ceremony in my head, seeing Cassandra's eyes, feeling those hands on my shoulders. I tried researching Guardians of the Pine online, but found nothing. True to his word, Bennett escorted me back to my apartment the next day. Kevin had called in sick, reporting that I was too, buying us some time. My apartment looked untouched, but I packed only what I absolutely needed, unable to shake the feeling I was being watched. I quit my job at the community center via email, making up a family emergency. Victor responded almost immediately, expressing concern and saying the community would keep me in their thoughts. The friendly words felt like a threat. I'm staying with a college buddy a few hours away now. Officer Bennett calls every few days with updates. Apparently there's an ongoing investigation, but these things take time, and without hard evidence of criminal activity, there's only so much they can do. Sometimes I catch myself doubting my own memory. Maybe I overreacted. Maybe it was just some weird local tradition that I misunderstood. But then I remember the look in Cassandra's eyes, the smell of that liquid, the way everyone moved in perfect synchronization. And I know what I experienced was real. I don't know what would have happened if I'd drunk from that bowl. I don't know what binding myself to them would have meant, and I don't think I want to know. What scares me most is how normal everything seemed at first, how friendly and welcoming they all were, how easily I could have become one of them, another blank face in dark clothing, standing in the shadows, waiting for the next newcomer to whispering pines. I've been sitting on this experience for almost a month now, and I just need to get it off my chest. Maybe writing it down will help me sleep again without hearing those damn whispers. Maybe someone here has dealt with something similar and can tell me I'm not losing my mind. I started a new job last month as a plumber with Harrison & Sons, a small outfit in my hometown of Ravenhollow. Nothing fancy, but after completing my certification, I was just happy to land something steady. My first day started normal enough. Mike Harrison, the owner, gave me the company shirt, showed me around the workshop, and handed me the keys to one of their vans. I remember feeling pretty good about everything, like I was finally getting my life on track. Then Mike handed me my first assignment, a leaky pipe at the Blackwood Mansion on the edge of town. I'd driven past that place a million times growing up, but never been inside. It sits on this hill overlooking everything, all Gothic and imposing with these weird spires and stuff. As a kid, we used to dare each other to run up and touch the front gate, but nobody ever had the guts. "Just a heads up," Mike said as I was heading out. "Old man Blackwood is particular. Just do the job, don't ask too many questions, and get out of there. He pays well and on time, that's what matters." I remember thinking it was weird advice, but figured he was just an eccentric rich guy who didn't like people in his space. Boy, was I wrong. The drive up to the mansion took about 20 minutes. The property is surrounded by these massive oak trees that block out most of the sunlight, and the gravel driveway seems to go on forever. I pulled up to the house around 10 a.m., and just sitting in the van, looking up at the place, I got this weird feeling in my stomach, like something was off. I grabbed my toolbox and walked up to the front door. This massive wooden thing with a brass knocker shaped like a raven's head. Before I could even knock, the door swung open. Richard Blackwood stood there, tall and thin with these piercing blue eyes that seemed to look right through me. He had to be in his 80s at least, but he stood perfectly straight, not a hunch in his posture. His white hair was slicked back, and he wore this old-fashioned suit that looked like it belonged in another century. "You must be from Harrison's," he said. His voice was deep but quiet, like he wasn't used to speaking much. "The leak is in the basement. Follow me." No hello, no small talk, just straight to business. Fine by me. I followed him through the house, trying not to gawk at everything. The place was like a museum. Antique furniture everywhere, paintings that looked centuries old, display cases with weird artifacts I couldn't identify. Everything seemed meticulously placed, but there was a layer of dust on almost everything, like he had all this stuff but didn't actually care about maintaining it. We went through this long hallway where the walls were lined with these creepy portraits. I swear the eyes in some of them seemed to follow me as I walked. I told myself I was being stupid, that it was just one of those optical illusion paintings. The basement door was this heavy oak thing with iron bands across it, like something from a medieval castle. Blackwood pulled out this ancient-looking key ring with about a dozen keys on it, selected one without even looking, and unlocked the door. "Watch your step," he said, flicking on a light switch that illuminated a steep stone staircase. "The stairs are old." The temperature dropped about 20 degrees as soon as we started descending. I'm not exaggerating. It was like walking into a freezer. The walls were stone, and there was this musty, damp smell mixed with something else I couldn't place. Something metallic, sweet. I don't know how to describe it, but it made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. The basement was massive, much bigger than I expected. Low ceiling, stone walls, concrete floor, pipes running along the ceiling in a complicated network. Old wooden crates and furniture stacked against the walls. The main area was lit by a few bare bulbs hanging from the ceiling, but the corners were all in shadow. "The leak is coming from behind that wall," Blackwood said, pointing to where water was visibly seeping through the stone. "I'll leave you to it. Call if you need anything." And then he just left, climbing back up the stairs without another word. I got to work, setting up my tools and inspecting the leak. Pretty standard stuff. An old pipe had corroded and was seeping at the joints. I was in the middle of measuring for a replacement section when I heard it for the first time. A whisper. It was so faint I thought I'd imagined it, like someone exhaling the word "help" right next to my ear. I jerked my head around, but of course no one was there. Just me in this dim basement. I laughed nervously and went back to work. A few minutes later I heard it again, clearer this time. "Help us." It seemed to come from inside the wall I was working on. "Hello?" I called out, feeling stupid immediately. I figured it had to be the pipes, just air or water making weird sounds as they moved through. That happens all the time in old systems, but then it came again, and this time it wasn't just one voice, but several overlapping. "He knows. Help us. Below. Blood." I nearly dropped my wrench. This wasn't water in pipes. These were words, actual words. I took a step back from the wall, my heart hammering in my chest. That's when I noticed something about the crates stacked in the corner to my right. They didn't quite sit flush against the wall. There seemed to be a gap behind them. I'm not sure what possessed me to investigate. In horror movies, this is where the audience is screaming at the character to just leave. But curiosity got the better of me. I moved a few of the crates aside, and sure enough, there was a door. Not a modern door. This thing looked ancient, made of dark wood with these strange symbols carved into it. Some looked like letters from an alphabet I didn't recognize, others like weird geometric patterns. The whispers got louder the moment I uncovered the door. "Open, please. Help." They had this urgent, desperate quality that made my skin crawl. I hesitated. This wasn't my business. I was here to fix a pipe, not snoop around some old guy's house. But something compelled me to reach for the iron handle. It turned easily, which surprised me. I expected it to be locked. The door swung open silently, revealing a room about 15 feet square. The walls, floor, and ceiling were covered in more of those symbols, but these were painted in what looked disturbingly like dried blood. The room was lit by candles in iron holders, their flames completely still despite the draft from the door opening. In the center of the room sat a large wooden table. On it were arranged what I can only describe as tools for some kind of ritual. A silver knife with a bone handle, several small bowls containing different colored powders, a few small animal bones, and what looked like a human skull, yellowed with age. Open on a stand was this massive old book, its pages covered in more of those symbols and diagrams that made my eyes hurt to look at. The whispers in this room were overwhelming, coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. "He's coming! Run! Blood! Below!" I couldn't make sense of most of it, just fragments that sent ice through my veins. I was about to back out when I noticed what was on the floor around the table. Stains, dark brown stains in patterns that couldn't be anything but blood, a lot of blood. And they weren't old stains. Some still looked slightly damp. That's when I heard the stairs creak. I froze. The whispers suddenly stopped, like someone had flipped a switch. The silence was somehow worse. I quickly backed out of the room and tried to push the crates back into place, but I only managed to move one before Blackwood appeared at the bottom of the stairs. He just stood there for a moment, those blue eyes taking in the scene, me, the partially exposed door, the crate in my hands. His face didn't change expression, but something in his eyes did. They seemed to grow colder, more focused. "I see you've been exploring," he said, his voice eerily calm. "That's unfortunate." My mouth went dry. "I'm sorry, sir. I heard a noise and thought it might be related to the pipes. I didn't mean to intrude." He started walking toward me, slowly, deliberately. "What did you hear exactly?" The way he asked it made my blood run cold, like he knew about the whispers, like he'd heard them too. "Just, water sounds. Thought it might be another leak," I lied, backing up until I hit the wall. My hand slid into my pocket, gripping my phone. He stopped a few feet away from me, his head tilting slightly. Curious. Most people don't hear anything at all. He smiled then, and I swear it was the most terrifying thing I've ever seen. Not because it was menacing, but because it was so empty. Like someone who'd forgotten how to smile was trying to imitate one. "Let me ask you something, Noah," he said, and the fact that he knew my name when I was sure I hadn't told him sent another wave of panic through me. "Do you believe in sacrifice? In power that can only be obtained through exchange?" My eyes darted to the stairs behind him. Could I make it past him? Would running make things worse? "I really should finish fixing that pipe, sir," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "My boss will be expecting me back soon." "Michael knows better than to expect his people back quickly from this house," Blackwood said with that same empty smile. "He's sent me many workers over the years. Some stay longer than others." The implication hit me like a truck. Had other people disappeared here? Was Harrison sending people here knowing they might not come back? "I'm actually feeling pretty sick," I said, starting to edge along the wall toward the stairs. "I think I need to reschedule. I can come back tomorrow with the right parts." Blackwood's eyes never left mine. "The leak still needs fixing, Noah, and so do other things now. You've seen too much, but perhaps that's fortuitous. I've been needing someone with your vitality." I'm not ashamed to say I panicked then. I feinted left, then bolted right, trying to get around him to the stairs. He was faster than anyone his age had any right to be. His hand shot out and grabbed my arm with this iron grip that felt impossible for someone so thin and old. "I can't let you leave now," he said, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. "Not when you've heard them. They've chosen you." That's when the whispers started again, louder than before, more frantic. "Run! Death! Below! Blood for him!" I yanked my arm free with all my strength, nearly falling backward. In that moment, one of the pipes above us burst, sending a spray of rusty water right into Blackwood's face. He recoiled, shouting something in a language I didn't recognize, and I took my chance. I bolted for the stairs, taking them two at a time, the whispers practically screaming in my ears now. Behind me, I heard Blackwood recovering, his footsteps starting up the stairs after me. I hit the main floor running, trying to remember the way through the maze-like hallways. Every portrait on the wall seemed to be watching me, their eyes following as I sprinted past. I swear some of them had changed, faces that were now snarling or grinning with too many teeth. I finally saw the front door and slammed into it at full speed, yanking it open and practically falling down the front steps. I didn't stop running until I reached my van, fumbling with the keys as I looked back at the house. Blackwood stood in the doorway, completely calm now, just watching me. He raised one hand in what almost seemed like a wave goodbye, then slowly closed the door. I drove away so fast I nearly wrecked the van on that winding driveway. My hands wouldn't stop shaking the whole way back to the shop. When I got back, I went straight to Mike's office and told him everything. I expected him to think I was crazy, but instead he just got really quiet, then sighed deeply. "I was afraid of this," he said finally. "Blackwood's place has always been problematic. There are rumors about that family going back generations, dark stuff, disappearances, but he pays triple our normal rate in cash, so we keep sending people when he calls. No one's ever reported anything like what you're describing. You keep sending people there knowing something's wrong with that place?" I was furious. "What the hell, Mike? Until now it's just been weird vibes, Noah. Nothing concrete, nothing dangerous." He ran a hand through his hair. "Look, I'm sorry. If I'd known it was this bad, I wouldn't have sent you there. Just stay away from that place from now on. If he calls again, I'll go myself." I wanted to quit on the spot, but I needed the job. Mike promised me he'd never send me back there, and he gave me the rest of the day off. That night, the whispers started in my dreams. Same voices, same desperate pleas. "Help us. Below. He's coming." I've heard them every night since, sometimes during the day too when it's quiet. They're fainter now, more distant, but still there, still begging for help. 2 days ago, I was working a job across town when I saw Blackwood on the street, talking to some guy in a Harrison & Sons shirt, a new hire I didn't recognize. Blackwood looked up and our eyes met across the street. He smiled that empty smile and nodded at me, like we shared some secret. I tried to warn the new guy later that day, but Mike had already sent him to the mansion. He hasn't come back to work since. Mike says he quit without notice, but I don't believe it. I don't know what to do. The police would never believe me. I have no proof of anything, just what I saw and these whispers that won't leave me alone. They're getting more insistent now, like they're trying to tell me something specific. Last night, for the first time, I understood a complete sentence in my dream. The whispers came together to form clear words. "Others below. Soon you. Come back." I woke up in a cold sweat and found myself standing in my living room, keys in hand, like I'd been about to go somewhere, like I'd been about to drive back to that house. I don't know how much longer I can resist. The whispers are calling me back, and each night they get harder to ignore. Sometimes I catch myself getting in my car without remembering why. I find myself driving toward the edge of town before snapping out of it. They want me to go back, to help them. I don't know who they are or what's below, but I know one thing for sure. If I go back to Blackwood's mansion, I'll never leave again. I've been sitting on this experience for almost 3 months now, trying to make sense of it, but I just can't. Maybe writing it down will help. I don't expect anyone to believe me, but I need to get this off my chest. I started working at Pinewood Nursing Home back in September. I was between jobs and needed something to pay the bills while I figured out what to do with my life. I've always been good with older people. My grandma lived with us until I was 16, so I thought this would be a good fit. The pay wasn't great, but the hours worked with my schedule, and honestly, I thought it would be rewarding to help people in their final years. Pinewood sits on the outskirts of town, this massive brick building that was probably impressive 50 years ago, but now just looks tired. When I pulled into the parking lot for my first shift, I remember thinking it looked exactly like what you'd expect. Weathered brick exterior, windows that hadn't been updated since the 70s, and landscaping that was just barely maintained. I almost turned around and left right then. Something about the place just felt off. The inside wasn't much better. The fluorescent lights flickered in that way that gives you a headache after a few hours. And no matter how much cleaner they used, there was this underlying smell, like old books and something else I couldn't place. Not quite mold, but something musty and stale. Patricia, the head nurse, met me at the front desk. She was probably in her late 50s with this tight gray bun and reading glasses hanging around her neck on a beaded chain. She had that no-nonsense efficiency of someone who's been doing the same job for decades. "Emma, right? Follow me. We're short-staffed tonight, so we'll have to make this quick." As she led me down the hallway for orientation, I noticed how the light seemed to get swallowed up the further we went. The corridor stretched ahead, doors on either side, some open to reveal residents sitting in chairs or lying in beds. Many of them just stared blankly at TVs or out windows. It was depressing as hell. "You'll be responsible for the East Wing tonight," Patricia explained, walking briskly. "Basic care, helping with meals, bathroom visits, medication reminders, and just checking in. Most of our residents are fairly independent, but there are a few who need extra attention." She stopped outside room 217 and lowered her voice. "This is Harold Thompson. He has advanced dementia, but he's physically quite mobile, which can be a problem." She knocked once and pushed the door open without waiting for a response. The room was sparse, a hospital bed, a small dresser, a chair by the window. Harold sat in the chair, this tiny old man with wispy white hair and skin so pale it was almost translucent. He was staring out the window even though it was dark outside, and all he could possibly see was his own reflection. "Harold," Patricia said loudly, "this is Emma. She's new." Harold turned slowly, and I felt a chill run down my spine. His eyes were so blue they seemed to glow, and they fixed on me with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. For a moment, he didn't say anything, just stared. "You look like her," he finally whispered. Patricia sighed. "Harold, you say that about everyone. Emma's here to help take care of you." He kept staring at me. "No, she really looks like her." "Like who?" I asked, immediately regretting it when Patricia shot me a look. "Don't encourage him," she muttered. "Harold can be unpredictable, but he's harmless. He gets confused, sometimes has episodes where he thinks he's somewhere else or sees things that aren't there. Just standard dementia behaviors. If he gets agitated, call me." We continued the tour, meeting other residents, but I couldn't shake the feeling of Harold's eyes following me. By the time dinner rolled around, I was already exhausted just from trying to remember all the protocols and resident names. I was helping serve dinner trays when I noticed Harold again. He was sitting alone at a small table in the corner of the common area, not eating, just watching me. Every time I glanced his way, his eyes were fixed on me. When I brought his tray over, he grabbed my wrist. His grip was surprisingly strong for someone so frail. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice urgent. "They don't like new people." "Who doesn't?" I asked, trying to gently pull my arm away. "The ones downstairs. They're always watching. They're watching you now." I forced a smile. "Your dinner's getting cold, Mr. Thompson." "Harold," he corrected, finally releasing my wrist. "And you're Emma. I know you. I've seen you before." "I don't think so. This is my first day." He shook his head, agitated now. "Not here. Before. They showed me." I made some excuse and hurried away, telling myself it was just the dementia talking. But throughout dinner, I kept finding him staring at me, muttering to himself. At one point, I swear I heard him say, "She's next," just like the others. The evening dragged on. I helped residents back to their rooms, handed out evening medications under Patricia's supervision, and tried to ignore the growing unease I felt whenever I passed Harold's room. Around 10 p.m., most of the residents were settled for the night, and the facility got quiet. That special kind of quiet that makes every small noise seem amplified. I was at the nurse's station filling out paperwork when I heard it. A crash, followed by shouting coming from down the hall, Harold's hallway. Patricia was in the bathroom, so I rushed toward the noise. Harold's door was open, and inside, he was standing in the middle of the room, his bedside lamp shattered on the floor. His eyes were wild, his thin pajamas hanging off his bony frame. "They're coming up!" he shouted when he saw me. "Can't you hear them? They're in the walls." "Mr. Thompson, Harold, it's okay," I said, approaching cautiously. "Let's get you back to bed." "No!" He backed away from me. "You don't understand. They're here for you. They told me. They always tell me first." Patricia appeared beside me, somehow materializing just when needed. "Harold, that's enough. You'll wake everyone up." Together, we managed to guide him back to bed. Patricia cleaned up the broken lamp while I tried to calm him down. His hands were ice cold as he gripped mine. "You have to believe me," he whispered, his eyes suddenly clear and focused. "I'm trying to warn you." "I know," I soothed, not knowing what else to say. "Try to get some sleep now." As we left his room, Patricia shook her head. "He does this sometimes. Gets these episodes where he thinks there are people in the building who shouldn't be. Part of his condition." "Does he usually get so specific about new people?" She hesitated. "He fixates sometimes. Last month it was the janitor. Before that, another resident. Don't take it personally." I tried not to, but as the night wore on and the building settled into that creaking quiet old buildings have, I couldn't stop thinking about the fear in Harold's eyes. It hadn't seemed like confusion. It seemed like genuine terror. Around midnight, I was doing final rounds. The hallways were dimly lit, just enough to see where you were going, but not enough to chase away the shadows in the corners. I checked each room, making sure everyone was sleeping peacefully. When I got to Harold's room, I heard it, whispering. Not like someone talking in their sleep, but an urgent, hushed conversation. I paused outside his door, listening. I couldn't make out words, just the cadence of speech, but it sounded like more than one voice. I pushed the door open slowly. "Harold?" The whispering stopped abruptly. Harold was sitting upright in bed, staring at the far corner of the room where the shadows were thickest. When he turned to look at me, I nearly screamed. His face was different somehow, harder, older, his eyes sunken and dark. "They're here," he said flatly. "They're in the basement." I should have called Patricia. I should have closed the door and walked away. But something about the certainty in his voice made me pause. "Who's in the basement, Harold?" "The others, the ones who never left." He leaned forward. "You need to see, then you'll understand." I knew I shouldn't leave the floor, shouldn't leave the residence unattended, but something pulled at me. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe it was concern for Harold's mental state, or maybe it was something else, something I couldn't explain then and still can't now. "I'll check," I said, not sure why I was humoring him. "You stay here and try to sleep." He laughed, a dry, rattling sound. "Sleep is when they come for you." I left his room, telling myself I was just going to peek into the basement, prove to myself there was nothing there, and then report Harold's episode to Patricia. The basement door was at the end of the main hallway, past the nurse's station. Patricia was doing paperwork, her back to me, so I slipped by unnoticed. The basement door was heavy, metal, with a small window at eye level. It was unlocked, which surprised me. I'd assumed it would be staff-only access. The stairwell was concrete, illuminated by a single bulb that cast more shadows than light. As I started down, the temperature dropped noticeably. My breath fogged in front of my face, even though it was September and the rest of the building was almost uncomfortably warm. The basement itself was what you'd expect. Storage areas, the laundry room, maintenance supplies, the boiler. But it was the atmosphere that got to me. It was oppressive, like the air itself was thick. Water dripped somewhere, creating a steady rhythm that echoed. And there was this rustling sound, like paper being crumpled, that seemed to follow me as I moved through the space. I convinced myself it was just the ventilation system or pipes settling. Old buildings make noises, that's normal. But what wasn't normal was how hard it was to breathe down there, like something was pressing against my chest. I rounded a corner and nearly screamed when I saw a figure standing in the shadows. But it was just a maintenance coat hanging on a rack, swaying slightly in a draft I couldn't feel. I laughed at myself, the sound echoing eerily. That's when I heard it, footsteps coming from behind the boiler, soft, shuffling steps. "Hello," I called, my voice sounding small. "Is someone there?" The footsteps stopped. Then, slowly, a figure emerged from behind the hulking machinery. It was Harold, still in his pajamas, his feet bare on the cold concrete floor. "Harold, how did you—" I started, but stopped when I saw his face. He looked terrified. "They're here," he whispered, his eyes darting around the room. "Can't you feel them watching?" I was about to tell him we needed to go back upstairs when the basement door slammed shut with a bang that echoed through the room. The single light bulb flickered, casting the room into momentary darkness before brightening again. And then I heard it, the whispering, the same urgent, hushed tones I'd heard in Harold's room, but louder now, coming from all around us. I couldn't make out words, just this constant murmur that seemed to rise and fall like waves. Harold grabbed my arm, his fingers digging in painfully. "I told you, I warned you." I don't know what came over me, but suddenly I was terrified in a way I've never experienced before. It wasn't just fear. It was this bone-deep certainty that something was very wrong, that we were not alone, that something was closing in around us. I grabbed Harold's hand. "We need to go. Now." We moved as quickly as Harold could manage, which wasn't very fast. The whispering grew louder, and now I could almost make out words, my name, over and over, and other things I couldn't quite catch. The light bulb flickered more rapidly, plunging us into darkness for longer periods. During one of these dark moments, I swear I felt something brush against my face, cold, dry fingers trailing across my cheek. I screamed and pulled Harold forward, nearly dragging him up the stairs. We burst through the basement door, slamming it shut behind us. Patricia was standing there, looking alarmed. "What on earth are you doing?" she demanded. "And why is Harold out of bed?" I was breathing hard, trying to calm down. He was down there when I went to check." "Check what? You're supposed to be monitoring the residence. not exploring the basement. She looked at Harold, who was trembling beside me. And how did he get down there? Did you leave the floor unattended? I tried to explain what happened, about the whispering and the sudden darkness, but even as I spoke, I could see Patricia's expression hardening into disbelief. Emma, Harold has dementia. He gets confused and makes up stories, and sometimes new staff get caught up in those stories. She took Harold gently by the arm. Let's get you back to bed, Harold. As she led him away, he looked back at me, his eyes wide and pleading. They won't stop, he said. They'll never stop. Patricia got Harold settled and then pulled me aside at the nurse's station. Look, Emma, I understand the night shift can be unsettling, especially in a place like this, but I need staff who can stay focused and not get carried away with residents' delusions. I started, but she held up a hand. Just finish your shift. We'll talk tomorrow. But there was no tomorrow, at least not at Pinewood. I finished that shift in a daze, jumping at every noise, avoiding Harold's room entirely. When morning came, I handed in my resignation. Patricia wasn't surprised. It happens, she said, taking my badge. This job isn't for everyone. As I walked to my car, I glanced up at the building. Harold was at his window watching me. He raised a hand slowly, pressing it against the glass. His lips moved, forming words I couldn't hear but somehow understood. They're coming for you next. I haven't been able to shake this experience. Sometimes at night, I think I hear that whispering again, just on the edge of hearing. My apartment creaks and settles, and I tell myself it's just normal house noises. But sometimes, when I'm almost asleep, I swear I feel cold, dry fingers brushing against my face. I still don't know what happened that night. Was it just an old man's dementia and my own imagination running wild in a creepy old building? Or was there something else in Pinewood, something hiding in the basement? Something that Harold could see that the rest of us couldn't? All I know is that I'll never set foot in that place again. And sometimes I catch myself listening for whispers in the dark. I never thought I'd be typing this out, but I really need to get it off my chest. What happened to me started about 3 months ago, and I still get jumpy when I hear a car that sounds like his. I work as a delivery driver for this app. You know the one, where people order food and we bring it to them. The pay isn't great, but with tips and the flexibility to work whenever, it helps pay my bills while I'm finishing school. I've been doing it for almost 2 years now, and I've seen some weird stuff, but nothing like this. It was a Thursday evening around 7:30. The sun was just starting to set, casting those long shadows across the neighborhood I was delivering in, one of those picture-perfect suburbs where all the houses look kind of the same but in different colors. Manicured lawns, 2-car garages, the works. I pulled up to this house on Oak Ridge Drive, a 2-story with dark blue siding and white trim. Pretty normal looking. The app showed the order was for Marcus Webb, Italian food from that fancy place downtown, about $65 worth with a decent tip already added on. I grabbed the food bag and walked up to the door, rang the bell. The porch light flicked on, and this guy answered, maybe mid-30s, wearing a button-up shirt like he'd just gotten home from an office job. He had this perfectly trimmed beard and really intense blue eyes that I noticed right away because of how he stared at me. "Hey, delivery for Marcus," I said, holding up the bag. He smiled, way too wide, showing all his teeth. "That's me. Thanks so much for bringing this all the way out here." As I handed him the food, our fingers brushed, and he held the contact a second longer than necessary. Something about it made my skin crawl, but I tried to be professional. "No problem. Hope you enjoy your meal." As I turned to leave, he said, You have a really nice voice. Has anyone ever told you that? It's very soothing." I mumbled a quick thanks and hurried back to my car. It wasn't the weirdest comment I'd ever gotten on the job, but something about the way he said it stuck with me. I remember sitting in my car for a minute, watching the house in my rearview mirror. He was still standing in the doorway, watching me leave. I finished my shift around 10 p.m. and went home to my apartment, completely forgetting about the weird encounter. Just another day, right? The next morning, I woke up to a notification on my phone. It was from this dating app I use occasionally. Nothing serious, just to meet people. The notification said I had a new message from someone named Marcus. My stomach dropped before I even opened it. "Hey, what a coincidence finding you here. It's Marcus from last night's delivery. Hope you don't mind me reaching out, but I couldn't stop thinking about your voice." I stared at my phone, completely freaked out. I never mentioned my name during the delivery. I wasn't wearing a name tag. I definitely never mentioned what dating apps I use. How the hell did he find me? I immediately blocked him on the app and deleted the message. I told myself it was just a weird coincidence. Maybe he recognized me from my profile picture or something. About an hour later, I got a friend request on Instagram from an account with no profile picture. The username was mweb83. I rejected it immediately and set my account to private. Then my phone buzzed with a Facebook message request. "Alex, why did you block me? I just want to get to know you better. I'm not a bad guy." I felt sick. I never told him my name was Alex. I blocked him on Facebook too, and went through all my social media accounts, making everything private and changing my display names. I even Googled myself to see how easily someone could find my information. That evening, I had another delivery shift, but I almost called out. My brother Tyler convinced me to go, saying I couldn't let some creep ruin my income. He was right, but I was still on edge. I avoided picking up any orders from the neighborhood where Marcus lived. About halfway through my shift, I was delivering to an apartment complex across town when I noticed a dark sedan pull out of a parking spot and start following me. It kept a few cars back, but every turn I made, it made too. I couldn't see the driver clearly, but the car looked exactly like the one I'd seen in Marcus's dating profile pictures. My heart was hammering in my chest as I pulled into a busy gas station, parking right in front of the store where there were lots of people. The sedan slowed down as it passed by, then parked at the edge of the lot. It just sat there, engine running, for about 10 minutes while I pretended to check my phone inside my car. Finally, it drove away. I called Tyler immediately, my hands shaking so bad I could barely hold the phone. "Dude, I think that guy from yesterday is following me," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Tyler insisted on meeting me and riding along for the rest of my shift. I finished around 11 p.m. and crashed at his place instead of going back to my apartment. The next day, Tyler came with me for my entire shift. We were about an hour in when we stopped at the same gas station from the night before to grab some drinks. As we pulled out, Tyler suddenly gripped my arm. "That car, the dark sedan by the pump, is that him?" I looked over and felt my blood turn to ice. It was the same car, and this time I could clearly see Marcus behind the wheel, pretending to be on his phone but watching us in his mirror. Tyler wanted to confront him right there, but I convinced him we should go to the police instead. We drove straight to the Pinewood police station, checking constantly to make sure we weren't being followed. The officer at the desk took my story seriously, thank God. She asked me for all the details, Marcus's full name from the delivery app, his address, screenshots of the messages, descriptions of his car, including what I could remember of the license plate. They told me they'd look into it and advised me to document everything. For the next few weeks, I was constantly looking over my shoulder. I changed all my usernames on social media, tightened every privacy setting possible, shared my location with Tyler at all times, and completely avoided the neighborhood where I'd delivered to Marcus. I even switched to day shifts only and carried pepper spray. I checked my accounts obsessively for any sign of him. About a week after filing the police report, I got a call from an officer saying they'd spoken to Marcus and issued a warning. Apparently he claimed he was just trying to be friendly, and there was a misunderstanding. The messages stopped after that. I don't know if it was because of the police or if he just moved on to someone else. Sometimes that thought keeps me up at night. The idea that he might be doing this to someone else now. It's been 3 months, and I haven't heard from him or seen his car since. But I'm not the same person anymore. I used to love the freedom of driving around the city, meeting different people. Now, every time I drop off an order, I'm scanning the customer's face for any sign they might be too interested in me. I never linger after deliveries. I park where I can make a quick exit. Last week, I was at the grocery store when I thought I saw him down one of the aisles. I abandoned my cart and left immediately, heart pounding so hard I could barely breathe. It probably wasn't even him. The scariest part of all this wasn't just being stalked. It was how easily he found me. One brief interaction, just a few minutes at his front door, and suddenly he was in every part of my digital life. I never realized how vulnerable I was until it happened. I've thought about quitting the delivery job, but honestly, I need the money. So I keep working, keep looking over my shoulder, keep wondering if today will be the day he shows up again. I don't know what would have happened if he'd caught up to me that night. I don't want to know. All I know is that every time my phone buzzes with a notification from an account I don't recognize, my stomach drops through the floor. So if you're in the service industry or doing deliveries like me, be careful what information you put online. Check what people can find if they search your name. And trust your gut. If someone gives you that weird feeling, don't brush it off like I initially did. I still wonder sometimes if he's watching me, just waiting for me to let my guard down. The police said they can't do anything more unless he makes an actual threat or shows up at my home. So I'm just waiting, hoping he's found someone or something else to fixate on, and feeling guilty about hoping that. I check every car that parks near mine. I vary my routes home. I look at the faces of strangers differently now, wondering which ones might be capable of something like this. 3 months later, and I still jump when someone compliments my voice. I still get cold sweats thinking about what happened last Friday night. I've been doing food delivery for almost 2 years now. It's how I pay my rent while finishing up school. Never had any real problems before. Some rude customers, a few who didn't tip, the occasional wrong address, normal stuff. But what happened 3 nights ago? Man, I'm still shaking. I drive for all the main delivery apps, but I mainly use QuickDash because it's more popular in Ravenwood. Friday nights are usually great for making money. Everyone's ordering in, tips are better, and I can easily make 200 plus if I hustle. Last Friday started normal enough. I was making decent money, about $120 by 9:30 p.m., and was thinking about calling it a night in another hour. Then this order popped up on my screen. $18, $50 for the delivery itself, which was already high, plus a $30 tip added up front. Almost $50 for one delivery? That never happens. The pickup was from this Mexican place I deliver from all the time, but the drop-off location was in the industrial area on the east side of town. I hesitated for maybe 5 seconds. That area is pretty dead at night, especially on weekends. But $50 for probably 30 minutes of work? I'm not gonna lie, all I saw was the money. I hit accept before someone else could grab it. The restaurant was packed when I got there, but they had the order ready. 2 bags of food looked like enough for several people. I figured maybe it was for some night shift workers or something. The girl at the counter confirmed the name. Order for Marcus, right? I nodded, grabbed the food and headed back to my car. I punched the address into my GPS and started driving. The restaurant was in the busy part of downtown, and as I drove east, the streets got darker and emptier. The buildings changed from bright storefronts and apartments to warehouses and factories. After about 15 minutes, I was in the middle of the industrial park. Most of the streetlights were out, and there were hardly any cars around. My GPS told me to turn down this side road that looked like it hadn't been maintained in years. Potholes everywhere. I slowed down to avoid destroying my suspension. The few buildings I could see looked abandoned, broken windows, graffiti, chain-link fences with no trespassing signs hanging crooked. I started feeling uneasy. Why would anyone order food here? I checked the delivery notes again. All it said was, "Call upon arrival." The address led me deeper into the industrial park, past more abandoned buildings. Finally, my GPS announced, "You have arrived at your destination." I stopped my car and looked around. There was absolutely nothing that looked inhabited, just this massive warehouse with boarded-up windows and a partially collapsed roof. No lights, no cars, nothing that suggested anyone was there waiting for food. I double-checked the address. This was definitely it. I sat there for a minute, trying to decide what to do. Company policy says we're supposed to call the customer if we can't find them, so I grabbed my phone and called the number listed on the order. It rang 5 times before going to voicemail. A generic automated voice said, "The person you are trying to reach is unavailable." No name, nothing personalized. I hung up and tried again with the same result. That's when I noticed movement at the corner of the warehouse. I squinted through my windshield and saw what looked like someone standing in the shadows. Then I realized it wasn't just one person. There were at least 3 figures lurking near the edge of the building. My heart started racing. They weren't approaching my car or waving me down like a normal customer would. They were just watching. As my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I could see they were wearing masks or bandanas covering their faces. Every alarm bell in my head was going off. This wasn't right. Nobody orders $50 worth of tacos to an abandoned warehouse at 10 p.m. on a Friday unless something sketchy is going on. I put my car in drive, ready to get the hell out of there. That's when I heard the motorcycle. The sound came from behind me, getting louder fast. In my rearview mirror, I saw a single headlight approaching. The bike pulled up directly behind my car, blocking me from backing up. The rider was wearing all black with a dark visor helmet. I couldn't see their face at all. The masked figures by the warehouse started moving toward my car. One of them called out something I couldn't hear. Another raised his arm, pointing at me. I'm not proud of what I did next, but I panicked. I threw my car into reverse and hit the gas. There was a sickening thud and scraping sound as I slammed into the motorcycle. Through my mirror, I saw the rider tumble to the ground. The bike went down, sparks flying as it skidded across the pavement. I didn't stop to check if they were okay. I just shifted into drive and floored it. As I sped past the warehouse, one of the figures ran toward the road. I caught a glimpse of something in his hand, metallic, reflecting the moonlight. A gun. I'm almost certain it was a gun. I blew through a stop sign and took a turn so fast my tires squealed. I had no idea where I was going. I just needed to get away. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold the steering wheel. Once I hit the main road, I pulled over at the first gas station I saw and called 911. My voice was trembling as I told the dispatcher what happened. She kept telling me to breathe and stay calm. She asked if I was hurt, and I said no. She told me to drive directly to the Ravenwood Police Department on Center Street and that officers would be waiting for me. The police station was about 10 minutes away. The whole drive there I kept checking my mirrors, convinced that motorcycle or some other vehicle was following me. I probably ran 2 red lights. I didn't care. When I pulled into the police station parking lot, 2 officers immediately came out to meet me. I was still shaking. One of them, Officer Rivera, according to his name tag, helped me inside while his partner inspected my car. The back bumper was dented, and there were scratches all along the right side. Inside, they took me to a small room with a table and chairs. Officer Rivera brought me a cup of water and asked me to tell him everything that happened. I went through the whole story, from accepting the order to hitting the motorcyclist to fleeing the scene. "You did the right thing," he said when I finished. "We've had reports of similar incidents in that area. You're lucky you got away." They took my formal statement, which took almost an hour. They asked for the order details, the customer's name and phone number, and a description of everything I saw. I felt guilty about hitting the motorcyclist, but Officer Rivera assured me that self-defense laws would likely protect me in this situation. It was almost 1 a.m. by the time I left the police station. They advised me to go straight home and said someone would be in touch in the next few days. I didn't sleep at all that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those masked figures approaching my car. I spent Saturday and Sunday jumping at every noise outside my apartment. I kept the blinds closed and didn't leave except to get groceries on Saturday afternoon. I turned down all delivery requests that came through the apps. The thought of driving around the city, especially at night, made me feel sick. On Monday morning, I got a call from a Detective Phillips. He asked if I could come to the station to answer a few more questions. When I arrived, he showed me into his office and closed the door. "First, I want you to know you're not in any trouble," he said. "Based on your statement and what we've found, you were clearly the victim here." He explained that they'd been investigating a series of robberies targeting delivery drivers in Ravenwood over the past month. The warehouse I'd been sent to was known to the police as a location where a local gang called the East Side Skulls conducted various illegal activities. "We believe they've been using delivery services to lure drivers to remote locations," Detective Phillips said. "They place large orders with generous tips to make the deliveries appealing, then rob the drivers and steal their vehicles." He showed me photos of 3 men and asked if I recognized any of them. I couldn't be sure. I had only seen silhouettes and masked faces. But one of them had the same build as one of the figures I'd seen. "We raided the warehouse yesterday," he said. "Found evidence of drug manufacturing and stolen property from at least 4 other delivery drivers who weren't as fortunate as you. 2 of them ended up in the hospital. I asked about the motorcyclist I hit. Detective Phillips said they hadn't identified that person yet, but they did find traces of blood and motorcycle parts at the scene. He reassured me again that I wouldn't face charges for what happened. "Your quick thinking probably saved your life," he said. "These guys don't usually let witnesses walk away." That comment sent chills down my spine. I hadn't really processed how much danger I was actually in that night. Before I left, Detective Phillips advised me to take some time off from delivery driving and to consider talking to a therapist about the trauma I'd experienced. He also suggested I stay with friends or family for a few days if possible, just as a precaution. It's been 3 days now, and I still don't feel safe. My roommate's been great. He's been staying in with me and even drove me to the police station when they called. I haven't been able to work, which means I'm losing money I desperately need for rent. My car needs repairs I can't afford right now. The insurance company is giving me a hard time because I fled the scene of an accident, even though it was in self-defense. But the worst part is the fear. I keep thinking about what would have happened if I hadn't reacted so quickly. Would I have been another victim in the hospital? Or worse? I've been doing delivery gigs for so long, and I never once thought about how vulnerable I was, driving alone to strange addresses, often at night, carrying cash with a valuable vehicle. I don't know if I'll ever do delivery driving again. No amount of money is worth risking my life. That $50 tip that seemed so tempting nearly cost me everything. I keep replaying that moment in my head when I accepted the order, wishing I could go back and change it. The detective called again today to tell me they arrested 2 members of the gang, but they're still looking for others, including the person on the motorcycle. He asked if I wanted to press charges if they find them. I said yes, without hesitating. They need to be stopped before they hurt someone else. I still have nightmares about those masked figures approaching my car. Sometimes in my dreams, I don't get away in time. I wake up gasping for air, convinced they're in my room. I don't know how long it'll take before I feel normal again. If you're a delivery driver reading this, please be careful. Trust your instincts. If something doesn't feel right, it probably isn't. No tip is worth your safety. And stay away from the industrial areas in Ravenwood, especially at night. I learned that lesson the hard way. I've been delivering pizzas for about 3 years now. It's a decent gig, flexible hours, decent tips, and I can listen to podcasts while I drive. I've always prided myself on being efficient. The faster I deliver, the more orders I can take, the more money I make. Simple math. But after what happened last Tuesday, I'm seriously reconsidering this job. It started as a completely normal shift. Tuesday nights are usually pretty slow, so I was scrolling through my phone at the counter when the order came in around 8 p.m. 1 large pepperoni and sausage pizza, garlic knots, and a 2-liter of Coke. Nothing unusual. The delivery address was in Oak Ridge, this quiet suburban neighborhood about 10 minutes from our shop. Nice houses, good tippers usually. I remember checking the delivery notes on our app. Please knock, doorbell not working. The customer's name was Michael Thornton. Again, nothing out of the ordinary. I've probably delivered to hundreds of Michaels over the years. The pizza came out of the oven, I boxed it up, added the sides, and headed out. The night was chilly, and there was this light fog starting to roll in. Nothing major, just enough to make the streetlights have that hazy glow around them. I had my GPS going even though I knew the area pretty well. Force of habit, I guess. I pulled up to the house around 8:25 p.m. It was one of those 2-story suburban homes with perfect landscaping, the kind where you can tell someone actually cares about their yard. There were lights on inside, and the porch light was glowing too, which I always appreciate. Nothing worse than trying to navigate dark porch steps while balancing food. Despite the delivery note, I rang the doorbell anyway. We all do it, it's just automatic. To my surprise, it actually worked. I heard it chime inside, and a few seconds later, I saw a shadow move across the frosted glass panel next to the door. The door opened, and there stood this middle-aged guy, maybe in his late 40s. Short brown hair with some gray at the temples, neatly trimmed beard. He was wearing a blue button-up shirt tucked into khakis. Looked like he had just gotten home from an office job or something. But what immediately struck me was his smile. It was wrong somehow. Too wide, too many teeth showing, didn't reach his eyes. The kind of smile that makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up. "Hello there," he said, his voice weirdly cheerful. "You must be from Gino's." I nodded and started my usual spiel. "Hi, I've got a large pepperoni and sausage, garlic knots, and a Coke. Total comes to $24.87. He kept that smile plastered on his face as I handed him the pizza box and the bag with the other items. Our fingers brushed briefly during the handoff, and I swear his were ice cold despite the mild evening. "Just a moment," he said, setting the food down on what looked like a console table just inside the door. "My wallet is in the kitchen. Why don't you step inside while I grab it? It'll just take a second." This is where my internal alarm bells started going off. In 3 years of delivering, I've never once set foot inside a customer's house. It's both company policy and common sense. "I'm sorry, sir, but I can't come inside. It's against company policy," I said, trying to keep my tone light and professional. His smile faltered for just a split second before returning even wider than before. The hallway behind him was dimly lit, and I couldn't see much past him, but something about the darkness behind him made me uneasy. "Oh, don't worry about that. It's just a few steps. It's getting chilly out there, and I've got a nice tip for you. Come on in." He stepped back, opening the door wider. I stood my ground. "I appreciate it, sir, but I really can't. I can wait right here while you grab your wallet, no problem." That's when his expression changed. The smile remained, but his eyes, they went cold. Dead, almost. Like a switch had been flipped. "I insist," he said, his voice dropping lower. "It's just good manners to invite someone in, don't you think? Especially when they brought you something as delicious as pizza." My heart started racing. This wasn't normal customer behavior. "Sir, I'm sorry, but I need to stay out here. Company rules." I tried to sound firm. He took a step toward me, still smiling that horrible smile. "Rules are meant to be broken sometimes, Ryan." I froze. I never told him my name. I wasn't wearing a name tag. Our company doesn't use them. The only way he would know my name is if he'd ordered from us before and specifically remembered me, which seemed unlikely, or if he'd looked me up somehow. Either way, it freaked me out. "How do you know my name?" I asked, taking an instinctive step back. He laughed, but it sounded hollow. "Oh, I make it a point to know who's coming to my house. Safety first, right?" Before I could respond, he suddenly reached out and grabbed my wrist. His grip was shockingly strong, his fingers digging into my skin. "Come inside, Ryan. I just want to chat. Don't be rude now." He started pulling me toward the doorway. Panic shot through me. I yanked my arm back with enough force that I stumbled backward down the porch step. My heart was hammering in my chest. "Sir, I need you to pay for your order or I'm going to have to leave," I said, trying to keep my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. He stood in the doorway for a moment, just staring at me with that fixed smile. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a wallet. He took out 3 $10 bills and held them out toward me. "Keep the change," he said. "Consider it an apology for being so forward." I approached cautiously, took the money quickly, and backed away immediately. I didn't even bother with the receipt. "Thank you. Have a good night," I muttered, already turning to walk back to my car. "Oh, Ryan," he called after me. Against my better judgment, I looked back. He was standing on his porch now, that same eerie smile plastered on his face. He raised his hand in a mock salute. "I'll see you around," he said. "Maybe next time you'll stay a while." I got into my car so fast I nearly dropped my car keys. As I pulled away from the curb, I could see in my rearview mirror that he was still standing there, watching me leave. I didn't stop shaking until I was back at the pizza shop. When I got back, I immediately reported the incident to my manager, who seemed concerned but not particularly surprised. He's seen his share of weird customers. He promised to flag the address in our system and told me I wouldn't have to deliver there again. I also filed a report through the delivery app we use, detailing what happened. They sent back a generic response about how they take driver safety seriously and would review the customer's account. I tried to shake it off, but that night I kept waking up from nightmares where I was being dragged into that dark hallway. In each dream, I could never see what was waiting for me inside, but I knew it was something terrible. The next day, I called my friend Jason. He's been a police officer in our town for about 5 years now, and I figured he'd have some advice. We met for coffee, and I told him everything. "You need to file a police report," he said immediately after I finished. "This isn't just a creepy customer, Ryan. This guy tried to physically force you into his house. That's assault." I hesitated. "I don't know, man. Maybe he was just socially awkward or something. I don't want to make a big deal out of nothing." Jason gave me a serious look. "Trust me on this. In my line of work, I've seen how these situations can escalate. Better to have it on record now. If nothing else happens, great. But if this guy is targeting delivery people or others, having your report could help build a case." He was right, and deep down I knew it. That afternoon, I went to the Oak Ridge Police Department to file a report. I was directed to a detective, Sarah Collins, a stern-looking woman with short blonde hair and the kind of eyes that made you feel like she could see right through you. I recounted everything that had happened, trying not to leave out any details. Detective Collins typed notes as I spoke, occasionally asking me to clarify something. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair with a sigh. "Mr. Cooper, I want to thank you for coming in," she said. "I think you should know that you're not the first person to report concerning behavior from this address." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" "In the past 6 months, we've received 2 other complaints about Michael Thornton. One from a cable technician who reported similar behavior. Thornton attempted to get him to come into the basement to check a connection, became agitated when refused. Another from a woman who was walking her dog past his house and said he followed her for several blocks, asking personal questions." "Jesus," I muttered. "So this guy is like, what, a predator or something?" Detective Collins chose her words carefully. "We're building a case, but so far he's been careful to stay just on this side of the law. Harassment, intimidation, these things can be difficult to prosecute unless there's a clear pattern or a more serious offense." "He grabbed me," I pointed out, "tried to pull me inside his house. And that's why your statement is important," she nodded. "It shows escalation. Would you be willing to sign a formal statement and potentially testify if it comes to that?" I thought about that smile, those dead eyes, the way he knew my name without me telling him. The thought of facing him in court made my skin crawl, but the idea of him doing this to someone else, someone who might not be able to get away, was worse. "Yeah," I said, "I'll do whatever you need." After I signed my statement, Detective Collins walked me out. At the door, she paused. "Mr. Cooper, until this matter is resolved, I'd suggest you be extra aware of your surroundings. If you notice anyone following you, or if Thornton attempts to contact you in any way, call us immediately." "You think he might come after me?" The thought hadn't even occurred to me until that moment. I don't want to alarm you unnecessarily, but in my experience, people like this don't appreciate being reported. Just be cautious, that's all. As I walked to my car, I felt a weird mix of emotions. Relief that I'd done the right thing by reporting him. Pride that I might be helping to stop this guy from hurting someone else. But mostly, I felt a deep unease knowing that Michael Thornton was still out there, in that perfect suburban house with its manicured lawn and dark hallways. It's been 5 days since I filed the report. I've taken some time off from deliveries, told my boss I needed a break. I keep checking my rearview mirror when I drive and double-checking that my doors are locked at night. The weirdest part. Yesterday I received a text from a number I didn't recognize. All it said was, "The pizza was delicious, Ryan. Next time, I'll have to insist you join me." I blocked the number immediately and called Detective Collins. She said they'd look into it, but without a direct threat, there wasn't much they could do. They're still building their case against him, so now I'm left waiting, wondering if he's watching me, how he got my number, what would have happened if I'd gone inside that house. I can't help but think about all the other delivery drivers out there, ringing doorbells at strangers' houses every day, never knowing what might be waiting on the other side. I used to think the worst part of this job was dealing with people who didn't tip. Now I know better. The worst part is that you never really know who's opening that door. I've been a delivery driver for about 7 years now. I do the late-night shift around Westlake City, usually 6 p.m. to 2 a.m., sometimes later on weekends. You see a lot of weird stuff in this job: drunk college kids, sketchy neighborhoods, people answering doors in their underwear. But I've always managed to stay safe, at least until last Tuesday. I was having a pretty average night. Had delivered some pizzas to the university dorms, a couple of Chinese food orders to the downtown apartments, and was just cruising around waiting for my next ping. Around 10:30 p.m., I got an order for 2 burritos and chips from that 24-hour Mexican place on Oakwood Drive. The delivery address was Pine Creek Apartments, Building 4, Unit 117. Now, I know Pine Creek pretty well. It's this sprawling complex on the west side, maybe 12 buildings total with terrible lighting in the parking lots. The buildings are these 3-story walk-ups arranged in a weird maze-like layout that makes finding specific units a nightmare, especially at night. The parking situation is even worse. Narrow lanes with cars parked on both sides, and you can never find a spot near where you need to go. When I pulled into the complex, I immediately noticed how dark it was. Half the streetlights were burned out, and the ones that did work cast this dim yellowish glow that barely lit anything. I had to use my phone flashlight just to check the building numbers. I remember feeling uneasy as soon as I got there, but honestly, that's not unusual. A lot of these apartment complexes feel sketchy at night. As I was driving slowly through the complex looking for Building 4, I noticed a black sedan parked near the entrance with its headlights off but engine running. I didn't think much of it at the time, probably just someone waiting to pick someone up or dropping someone off. I found Building 4 after a few minutes of searching and had to park about 50 yards away since all the close spots were taken. The food app showed it was a contactless delivery, which meant I just had to leave the food at the door, take a picture, and go. No interaction required. I grabbed the bag from my passenger seat, locked my car — I always lock my car, even for quick drop-offs — and headed toward the building. Finding Unit 117 took another 5 minutes of walking around the first floor of the building. Why don't these places ever have logical numbering systems? I finally found it, left the food by the door, took the picture, and started walking back to my car. That's when I got that feeling. You know that feeling when you just know someone's watching you? The hair on your neck stands up, and something in your gut tells you something isn't right. I glanced around but didn't see anyone. The complex was eerily quiet, just the distant sound of a TV from one of the units and the occasional car passing on the main road outside the complex. I quickened my pace, keeping my keys between my fingers like my mom taught me years ago. When I was about halfway back to my car, I noticed that black sedan again. Only now it wasn't by the entrance anymore. It had moved and was parked just a few spaces away from my car. The engine was still running, but I couldn't see inside because of the tinted windows. My heart started beating faster. I told myself I was being paranoid, that it was probably just a coincidence, but my instincts were screaming at me to be careful. I kept walking toward my car, trying to appear casual while keeping my eyes on that sedan. I made it to my car without anything happening, quickly unlocked it with the key fob, got in, and immediately locked the doors again. I was just about to start the engine when I saw movement in my rearview mirror. Someone was getting out of the sedan. It was a man in a dark hoodie pulled up over his head. He walked purposefully toward my car. I started the engine, but before I could put it in reverse, he was at my window knocking on the glass. I cracked the window about an inch, not enough for him to reach in, but enough to hear what he wanted. I figured maybe he needed directions or something. "Hey," he said, his voice casual but his face mostly hidden by the hood. "I missed the last bus. Can you give me a ride to the gas station down the street? It's just like 2 minutes away." Every alarm bell in my head was ringing. This wasn't right. Why ask a random delivery driver for a ride when you have your own car? "Sorry, I can't," I said firmly. "Company policy. I'm not allowed to give rides." His whole demeanor changed instantly. His shoulders tensed, and his voice dropped lower. "Come on, man, don't be like that. Just a quick ride." I put my car in reverse, but before I could back up, he suddenly pushed down hard on my partially open window, forcing it down further. I hit the window lock button, but he already had his arm in, reaching across me to grab the gear shift and force it into park. "Get out of the car!" he shouted, all pretense gone. I looked in my rearview mirror and saw that the black sedan had now pulled up directly behind me, blocking me in. A second person in a dark hoodie was getting out. Pure panic hit me. The first guy was trying to climb in through my window now. I'm not a small person, but I was trapped in the driver's seat with limited mobility. He grabbed my jacket and tried to pull me toward him. "Get out now, or we'll drag you out," he hissed. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." I did the only thing I could think of. I slammed my hand on the horn and held it down. The blaring noise cut through the quiet night like an explosion. The guy tried to cover my hand to stop me, but I kept my palm pressed firmly on the horn. That's when something unexpected happened. The door to Unit 117 burst open, and this huge, shirtless dude came running out. He must have been at least 6'4", built like a linebacker with tattoos covering his chest and arms. He was shouting as he ran across the parking lot toward us. "Hey, what the hell are you doing? Back the fuck up! That's my delivery driver!" The guy trying to get into my car froze, then quickly pulled his arm back out of my window. The second person, who had almost reached my passenger door by then, stopped in his tracks. "He's just delivering the food I ordered. Get the fuck away from him!" The shirtless guy continued shouting as he approached. My would-be carjackers exchanged a quick look, then both rushed back to their sedan. They peeled out of the parking lot so fast they left skid marks, nearly hitting a parked car as they swerved toward the exit. I sat there, still holding the horn, my whole body shaking. The shirtless guy, who I now realized must be the customer whose burritos I had just delivered, came up to my car. I rolled the window down slightly, still wary. "You okay, man?" he asked, looking genuinely concerned. I nodded, not trusting my voice yet. "I'm Xavier," he said. "Those guys have been hanging around the complex for the past week. Management sent an email about some suspicious activity, but I didn't know they were trying to carjack people." I finally found my voice. "Thanks for coming out. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't." Xavier shrugged like it was nothing. "I heard the horn and figured something was up. Just got my food and then all that noise started. Couldn't enjoy my burrito knowing something was going down in the parking lot." He paused. "You sure you're okay to drive? You want to come in for a minute, call the cops or something?" I appreciated the offer, but declined. The last thing I wanted was to stay in that complex any longer. I thanked him again, made sure he stepped back from the car, and then carefully navigated out of the parking space. I checked my mirrors constantly to make sure the black sedan wasn't returning as I left Pine Creek. I didn't complete any more deliveries that night. I went straight home, double-checked all my locks, and sat on my couch staring at the wall for what felt like hours. I kept replaying the scenario in my head, thinking about what I could have done differently. Should I have kept the window completely closed? Should I have just reversed immediately when I saw him coming? Would they have followed me if I had tried to drive away? The next morning, I reported the incident through the delivery app and called the local police to file a report. The officer who took my statement said they'd had similar reports in that area recently, but hadn't caught the suspects yet. He advised me to avoid delivering to Pine Creek for a while, which was advice I was definitely going to follow. I also posted a warning in our local delivery drivers group chat, describing the car and what happened. Turns out, I wasn't the first one to have a sketchy experience at Pine Creek. Another driver commented that he'd been followed from there to his next delivery location just a few nights earlier, but managed to lose them by pulling into a police station parking lot. The hardest part now is figuring out what to do about Pine Creek deliveries. On one hand, I don't want to punish all the residents there just because of these two guys. Most of the people living there are just normal folks who want their food delivered like anyone else. On the other hand, I can't stop seeing that guy's face as he reached through my window. Can't stop feeling that moment of absolute terror when I realized I was trapped. I've been doing this job for 7 years without a major incident, but this one night has completely changed how I approach deliveries. I'm much more cautious now. I don't deliver to complexes I'm not familiar with after a certain hour. I keep my doors locked at all times, even when I'm driving. I no longer crack my window for anyone I don't know, and I make sure to park where I can easily drive away without being blocked in. The thing that haunts me most is knowing how differently this could have ended if Xavier hadn't come out when he did, or if I hadn't honked the horn. Would they have just taken my car, or was it something worse? I keep thinking about how vulnerable we delivery drivers are, going to unfamiliar places, often alone, at night, carrying cash sometimes. It's been a week, and I still jump whenever someone approaches my car. I'm still delivering, but I've switched to day shifts for now. The money isn't as good, but at least I can see who's around me. I don't know if I'll ever feel comfortable doing late-night deliveries again. So yeah, that's my story. I've seen a lot of weird stuff in this job, but nothing that left me shaken like this. If there's one thing I've learned, it's to trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Keep your doors locked, your phone charged, and know how to get help quickly. And never underestimate the value of a car horn and a hungry, shirtless customer with good timing. I've owned Pinewood Diner for almost 10 years now. It's this little place on Main Street that's become kind of a landmark in our small town. Nothing fancy, just good food, better coffee, and the kind of atmosphere where everybody feels at home. At least that's what it was supposed to be. I never thought I'd be writing something like this. Even now, 2 weeks later, my hands are still shaky typing this out. I guess I need to get it off my chest, and maybe writing it down will help me make sense of what happened. That Thursday started like any other. Morning rush with the regulars coming in for their usual breakfast orders. Bob with his eggs over easy and extra crispy bacon. Martha and her friends taking up the corner booth for their weekly gossip session over pancakes. The lunch crowd was steady, nothing crazy. By dinner, things had slowed down, which was normal for a Thursday night in Pinewood. Around 8:30, most of the dinner crowd had cleared out. It was just me, Amy, who's been serving tables here for about 3 years, and Joe, my cook, who's been with me since I opened the place. We were all in good moods. Joe had lost at his weekly poker game the night before and was telling us how his wife wouldn't let him hear the end of it. We were laughing, cleaning up, getting ready for the final hour before closing at 10. That's when the bell over the door jingled. I remember looking up, expecting to see one of our regulars. Instead, there was this man I'd never seen before. He was tall, maybe 6'2", wearing this massive brown jacket that hung off him like it was 3 sizes too big. His jeans were frayed at the bottom, and his hair looked like it hadn't been washed in days. But it wasn't his appearance that bothered me. We get old types in here, especially being the only diner open past 8 in town. It was his eyes. They just didn't look right. Not drunk or high, just empty. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there scanning the diner. I noticed Amy tense up behind the counter, and Joe had stopped wiping down the grill to watch. "Can I help you?" I asked, trying to sound normal. He mumbled something about needing coffee and shuffled to a window booth without waiting for me to respond. I looked at Amy, who raised her eyebrows at me. I just shrugged and grabbed a menu and coffee pot. "Just coffee," he said when I approached. His voice was raspy, like he hadn't used it in a while. "I'm waiting for my ride." "Sure thing," I said, pouring him a cup. "Kitchen's still open if you'd like something to eat." He shook his head without looking at me. "Just waiting." That should have been my first real warning. He never touched the coffee, not once. For almost 2 hours, he just sat there staring out the window into our mostly empty parking lot. We had a couple more customers come and go, but by 10 p.m., it was just us and him. I started the closing routine, wiping down tables, restocking condiments, counting the register. Joe was cleaning the kitchen, and Amy was sweeping. The man still hadn't moved from his spot. "I think I should stay until he leaves," Joe said quietly when I went back to check on the kitchen cleanup. "Me too," Amy added, coming in behind me with her broom. "Something's off about that guy." I waved them off. "It's fine. He's probably just waiting for a ride like he said. Maybe they're running late." "Sarah, I really don't think," Joe started. "Guys, I've been dealing with all kinds of customers for years. He's harmless. You both have families waiting at home." I smiled, trying to reassure them and myself. "I'll be fine. I'll just let him know we're closing and call him a cab if he needs one." God, I was so stupid. So arrogant. After some back and forth, I convinced them to leave around 10:45. Amy made me promise to text her when I got home, and Joe said he'd circle back around after dropping off his cleaning supplies at home. Once they left, I took a deep breath and approached the man's table. He was still staring out the window, his coffee completely untouched and cold. "Excuse me, sir, we're closed now." I tried to sound firm but polite. I can call you a cab if your ride isn't coming. That's when everything changed. He turned to look at me, and his face was different. Not physically, but the expression. His eyes were suddenly focused, intense, like he was really seeing me for the first time. "You took it," he said, his voice no longer raspy but clear and sharp. "I'm sorry." I stepped back instinctively. "You took it." He slammed his hand on the table, making the coffee cup bounce and spill. "Don't pretend you don't know what I'm talking about." My heart started pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. "Sir, I don't know what you're talking about. I need you to leave now." He stood up suddenly, knocking over his chair. He was so much taller than I'd realized. "I'm not leaving until you give it back." "Give what back?" My voice was shaking now. I was backing away slowly toward the counter where my phone was. "You know!" He grabbed the table and flipped it. The crash was deafening in the empty diner. Coffee, sugar packets, and napkins went flying everywhere. I bolted for the counter, but he was surprisingly fast. He grabbed my arm with a grip so tight I knew it would bruise. "Where is it?" He screamed in my face. His breath smelled like cigarettes and something rotten. I wrenched my arm free and ran for the kitchen, my only thought to get to the phone and lock myself in. I heard him knocking over chairs behind me, screaming incoherently about how I'd stolen something from him, how I was going to pay. I made it to the kitchen and slammed the door, turning the deadbolt just as he crashed against it. Thank God Joe had insisted on installing that lock after a break-in 3 years ago. The man was pounding on the door, the whole thing shaking with each hit. "I know you're in there. Give it back. Give it back, or I swear I'll kill you." My hands were shaking so badly I could barely dial 911. I remember whispering into the phone, terrified he would hear me through the door. 911, what's your emergency?" "Please help me," I whispered, crouching down by the prep table. "I'm at Pinewood Diner on Main Street. There's a man trying to break in the kitchen door. He's threatening to kill me." I was crying now, unable to stop the tears. "Ma'am, stay on the line. Officers are on their way. Are you somewhere safe?" "I'm locked in the kitchen, but the door's not very strong. He's going to get through." Through the small window in the kitchen door, I could see him moving around the diner. He stopped pounding on the door and started attacking the cash register, trying to pry it open. When that didn't work, he picked up one of the counter stools and hurled it across the room, shattering the glass display case where I kept the pies. "I can see you watching me," he suddenly screamed, turning back toward the kitchen. He grabbed another stool and started toward the door again. "He's coming back," I whispered into the phone, ducking down where he couldn't see me through the window. "Please hurry." The pounding resumed, harder this time, metal against wood. He was using the stool to try to break the door. "You think this door will save you?" Bang! "You think you're safe in there?" Bang! "I'll find you anywhere you go." Bang! The wood around the lock was starting to splinter. I looked around frantically for a weapon, anything to defend myself with. I grabbed the largest knife from the block and retreated to the corner farthest from the door, behind the industrial refrigerator. "I can hear police sirens," the dispatcher said in my ear. "They're almost there." I couldn't hear anything over the blood rushing in my ears and the pounding on the door. Each blow made me flinch. I was pressing myself against the wall so hard it hurt, as if I could somehow melt into it and disappear. Then I heard it, sirens in the distance getting louder. He heard it too. The pounding stopped. "You called them?" His voice was suddenly quiet, almost conversational, which somehow made it more terrifying. "That was stupid, Sarah." My blood ran cold. I had never told him my name. "You think this is over?" he continued. "It's never over. I'll find you again." The bell over the front door jingled, and then there was silence. The most awful silence I've ever experienced. I stayed frozen in that corner, clutching the knife, until I heard pounding on the door again. "Police! Is anyone in there?" I nearly collapsed with relief. "Yes, I'm here. I'm locked in." When I opened the door, there were 2 officers with their hands on their holsters. The younger one looked alarmed when he saw the knife I was still gripping. "Ma'am, please put down the knife." I hadn't even realized I was still holding it. I set it on the prep table and burst into tears. They led me out to the dining area. The destruction it looked like a tornado had hit. Tables overturned, broken glass everywhere, food splattered on the walls. My beautiful diner, my dream, my safe place. It looked like a war zone. "We caught him in the parking lot," the older officer told me, as I sat trembling at the only table still upright. "He didn't get far." Did he say anything?" I asked. The officer looked uncomfortable. He was ranting, not making much sense. Said something about you stealing from him. "I've never seen him before in my life," I said. "Well, he's in custody now. He's wanted for similar incidents in neighboring counties. Apparently, he's been targeting small businesses after hours, making the same accusations." They took my statement, helped me secure the diner, and offered to call someone to stay with me. I called Amy, who came immediately, and insisted I stay with her family that night. It's been 2 weeks, and I still haven't reopened. The physical damage has been repaired. New display case, fixed door, replaced tables. But I can't bring myself to go back alone. I've hired a night security guard, installed cameras, and implemented new closing procedures. No one will ever be alone in that diner again, especially after dark. The police told me the man had severe mental health issues and had stopped taking his medication. They found my name and information about the diner in a notebook he carried, along with details about other business owners in the area. They think he was stalking potential targets for weeks. What keeps me up at night, what makes me afraid to go back, is knowing he had been watching me long before I ever saw him, that he knew my name, my routine, when I would be alone, that my diner, the place that had always been my sanctuary, had been on his radar as a target. I keep replaying that night, wondering what would have happened if I hadn't convinced Amy and Joe to leave, if I hadn't made it to the kitchen in time, if the police had been just a few minutes later. I know I need to move forward. The diner isn't just my livelihood. It's my dream. I can't let him take that from me. But every time I think about unlocking those doors before dawn, turning on the lights, being there alone in those quiet morning hours, I feel it again, that paralyzing fear, the certainty that someone is watching, waiting. The rational part of me knows he's locked up, but another part, a part I can't silence, keeps hearing his last words to me. "I'll find you again." I've worked at Riverdale Diner for about 6 months now. It's nothing fancy, just your typical small-town place with vinyl booths, slightly sticky menus, and the eternal smell of coffee and grease. But the pay is decent. My manager works around my class schedule at Westfield University, and it keeps enough gas in my old Honda Civic to get me around. Last Friday night started like any other shift. I clocked in at 4 p.m., tied on my apron, and got to work. The dinner rush came and went, the usual mix of college students grabbing cheap meals, local families out for Friday dinner, and travelers passing through our little town. Nothing out of the ordinary. Around 9 p.m., things started slowing down. Most of the booths had cleared out, except for a couple of students working on laptops and this one guy sitting alone in the corner booth. I hadn't noticed him come in, which was weird because I'd been manning the front all evening. He must have slipped in during the dinner rush. There wasn't anything immediately off about him. Maybe mid-40s, average build, wearing a plain blue baseball cap pulled low and a gray jacket. But something about him made me uneasy from the start. I couldn't place it. Maybe it was how still he sat, barely touching his coffee, or how his eyes followed me around the diner. I tried ignoring it. Working late shifts, you get used to odd customers. My coworker Allie had left at 8, leaving just me and Cook in the back for closing. I kept busy wiping down tables and refilling condiments, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Around 10 p.m. I had to approach his table. His coffee had gone cold, and I figured I'd offer a refill, hoping he'd pay and leave. "Can I get you anything else, sir?" I asked, trying to sound normal. He looked up slowly and smiled. Not a friendly smile. It didn't reach his eyes. "Jason, right?" he said, pointing to my name tag. "You work here often?" "Most weeknights," I answered automatically, immediately regretting giving out that information. "College student?" he asked, still with that same smile. "Westfield, I'm guessing?" My stomach tightened. Westfield was the obvious guess, since it's the only university nearby, but something about the way he asked made me uncomfortable. "Just finishing up my business degree," I said vaguely. "Would you like another coffee?" He pushed his cup toward me. "You're smart. I can tell. I like smart guys. What classes are you taking this semester?" The way he emphasized smart guys made my skin crawl. I mumbled something about business statistics as I poured his coffee, trying to keep my hand steady. "Monday and Wednesday afternoons?" he asked, staring directly at me now. "Or are those your morning classes?" I froze. I'd never mentioned my schedule. Was it just a random guess? I stepped back slightly. "We're closing at 11 tonight," I said, changing the subject. "Just to let you know." He nodded slowly. "You have nice hands," he commented as I set down his coffee. "Long fingers. Piano player?" "No," I said sharply, pulling my hands away. "I'll get your check." As I walked away, I could feel his eyes on my back. I went to the kitchen and stayed there longer than necessary, telling Cook about the weird guy. Cook peeked through the serving window and shrugged. "Just another weirdo passing through," he said. "Want me to go out there?" I said no. I didn't want to make a big deal out of nothing. When I returned with the check, the man continued making uncomfortably personal comments. He asked if I lived in the student apartments near campus or if I had my own place. He mentioned how he'd seen me around town but couldn't place where. When I told him his total, he handed me cash, making sure our fingers touched in the exchange. "You look tired, Jason," he said, eyes never leaving my face. "Long day of classes before your shift, or were you up late studying?" I didn't answer, just gave him his change and walked away. For the next hour, he just sat there, occasionally sipping his coffee but mostly watching me. Every time I glanced his way, his eyes were on me. Finally, around 11:15, he got up. Relief washed over me. As he walked to the door, he stopped where I was wiping down the counter. "Be careful driving home tonight, Jason," he said quietly. "That old Honda of yours might not be reliable in the dark." My blood went cold. I'd parked my car behind the diner where employees park. There's no way he could have seen it from inside. I mumbled a goodbye, watching him walk out into the parking lot. I couldn't see where he went or what car he got into. I told Cook what happened as we closed up, and he walked me to my car at midnight when we finished. Nothing seemed out of place. No one was in the parking lot. I felt stupid for being so freaked out, but Cook understood. "Better safe than sorry," he said. "Text me when you get home." I got in my Honda, locked the doors immediately, and pulled out of the lot. The streets were nearly empty, typical for Riverdale at midnight. I live about 15 minutes from the diner, mostly through residential areas with a stretch of highway in between. About 5 minutes into my drive, I noticed headlights behind me. No big deal. Other people drive at night too, right? But after I turned off the main road onto a smaller street heading toward my neighborhood, the car turned too. Still, could be coincidence. Plenty of people live in my direction. I made another turn. The car followed. At this point, my heart started beating faster. I remembered the guy's comment about my Honda and driving home in the dark. I made a random right turn down a street that didn't lead to my apartment. The car behind me turned too. Okay, definitely being followed. I tried to stay calm, thinking through my options. I couldn't go home. I didn't want this person knowing where I lived. I could call the police, but what would I say? Someone's driving behind me? I made another random turn, then another. Each time, the car followed at a consistent distance, not close enough to seem aggressive, but definitely tracking me. I couldn't see the driver through my rearview mirror, just headlights. A dark sedan, that's all I could tell. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel. I grabbed my phone and called 911, keeping my eyes on the road. 911, what's your emergency? The dispatcher answered. I think I'm being followed, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I'm driving through Riverdale, and there's a car that's been following me for the past 10 minutes through multiple random turns. The dispatcher asked for my location, which I gave her as I turned onto Cedar Street. Sir, I want you to drive directly to the police station on Main Street, she instructed. Don't stop for any reason. We'll have officers waiting. I agreed, taking the next right to head toward downtown. The car stayed behind me. I was breathing hard now, glancing constantly at my mirrors. The police station was about 5 minutes away. Stay on the line with me, the dispatcher said. Are they still following you? Yes, I responded, my voice cracking. About 3 car lengths back, a dark sedan. I can't see the driver. As I approached Main Street, I had to stop at a red light. Those few seconds were agonizing. Would the car pull up next to me? Would the driver get out? I kept my doors locked, ready to run the light if necessary. When it turned green, I accelerated harder than I meant to, my old Honda groaning in protest. I'm almost at the station, I told the dispatcher, seeing the building up ahead with its lit sign. They're still behind me. Then something weird happened. As I turned into the police station parking lot, the headlights behind me suddenly veered away. The car made a sharp turn down a side street and sped off. Just like that, gone. I pulled into the station's lot, parked, and sat there shaking for a full minute before I could even get out. The dispatcher was still on the line, asking if I was okay. I told her I'd made it, but the car had left. Inside, 2 officers took my statement. They were sympathetic, but didn't have much to go on. A dark sedan following me through town, possibly driven by a creepy customer from the diner. They promised to have a patrol car drive by the diner during my shifts for the next week and told me to call immediately if I saw the man or the car again. The drive home afterward was terrifying. I kept checking my mirrors, convinced the sedan would reappear. I called my roommate to make sure he was home and asked him to watch from the window as I parked and ran from my car to our building. I double-checked every lock that night and barely slept. It's been 3 weeks, and I haven't seen the man or the dark sedan again. I switched to day shifts when possible. When I do work nights, I park under the street light right by the diner's front entrance. And Cook or another co-worker always walks me to my car. I've started varying my route home and constantly check my mirrors while driving. The whole experience has messed with my head. I find myself scanning every diner customer's face, tensing up whenever a middle-aged man in a baseball cap comes in. I'm hyper-aware of who's watching me, who might be following me. I installed one of those doorbell cameras at my apartment and keep my location shared with friends 24/7. What keeps me up at night isn't just what happened. It's what could have happened if I hadn't called 911, if I'd driven home instead of to the police station. Who was this guy? How did he know what car I drove? Was he watching me before that night? And most importantly, will he come back? I keep thinking about his parting words. "Be careful driving home tonight, Jason." Like he'd already planned what was going to happen. Sometimes I wonder if he's still out there, waiting for me to let my guard down, waiting for a night when I'm alone in the diner parking lot, or taking my usual route home. The cops never found him. They checked the diner's security footage, but it only covers the register area, not the corner booth where he sat. Without a license plate or clear description, there wasn't much they could do. So here I am, still working at the same diner, still driving the same Honda, still living in the same apartment. But I'm different now. I notice things. Who comes in? Who watches too long? Which cars might be following me? My manager asked why I've been so jumpy lately. How do you explain that a 15-minute drive turned your whole sense of safety upside down? I don't know if the guy in the baseball cap and the person in the dark sedan were the same person. I don't know what they wanted from me. But I do know that something about me caught someone's attention that night, and for some reason, they decided to follow me. And I still don't know why they stopped when I reached the police station, or if they're just waiting for another opportunity. Sometimes I think about quitting my job, moving to a new apartment, trying to disappear. But another part of me thinks it wouldn't matter. If someone wants to find you, they will. All I can do is stay alert and keep looking over my shoulder, wondering if tonight will be the night those headlights show up in my mirror again. I've been sitting on this experience for almost 2 months now, but I need to get it off my chest. I haven't slept properly since it happened, and my wife says I jump every time the phone rings. She's right. I do. I manage the Hillcrest Diner just outside Oak Ridge. It's nothing fancy, just your typical small-town eatery with vinyl booths, a long counter with those spinning stools, and walls covered in old license plates and vintage signs. We're right off Highway 16, which means we get a mix of locals and travelers passing through. I took the manager position about 6 months ago after the previous guy retired. The pay's decent and the hours were supposed to be pretty normal. That changed when our night manager quit without notice. For the past 3 months, I've been covering the night shift twice a week while we look for a replacement. The night shift at Hillcrest is a whole different world. From 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., this place transforms. The fluorescent lights seem harsher against the darkness outside, and those big windows that frame the highway during the day become mirrors at night, reflecting everything inside while hiding whatever's out there in the dark. It's usually pretty quiet. A few truckers, some insomniacs from town, and occasionally college kids making a late-night food run. We run with minimal staff, just me, a cook, usually Tony, and one server. Most nights, I spend doing inventory, paperwork, and making sure everything's ready for the morning crew. The call started about a month after I began covering nights. The first one came around 2 a.m. on a Tuesday. I was going through invoices when the phone rang. "Hillcrest Diner, how can I help you?" I answered. There was nothing but heavy breathing on the other end. then a snicker before they hung up. I didn't think much of it. Wrong number, drunk dialer, bored teenager, whatever. But then it happened again the next night I worked, and again the following week. Same thing, heavy breathing, sometimes a laugh, then click. Annoying, but nothing to worry about. After about 2 weeks, things changed. I picked up the phone to the usual silence, but instead of breathing or laughing, a man's voice, calm and eerily controlled, asked, "Are you alone tonight, Michael?" It caught me off guard hearing my name. I hung up immediately, my heart pounding. I told myself it was probably just someone who knew me. Oak Ridge isn't exactly a metropolis, and plenty of locals know I manage the place. But something about the voice felt wrong. The calls continued every night I worked, always when I answered the phone personally. If Darlene or any other server picked up, nothing happened. Just normal calls for to-go orders or questions about our hours. But when I answered, it was always him. "Are you alone tonight, Michael?" I started letting the staff handle the phones. This worked for a while, but then the calls stopped coming altogether. For 2 weeks, nothing. I started to relax, figuring whoever it was had moved on to harassing someone else. That brings me to last Friday night. It was unusually slow. Just an elderly couple in a booth near the kitchen and a truck driver at the counter. Around 1:30 a.m., this guy walks in, average height, maybe early 40s, wearing jeans and a dark blue windbreaker. Nothing remarkable about him, but something just felt off. He took the corner booth, the one furthest from the door, but with a clear view of the entire diner, including the area behind the counter where I usually stand. Brenda, my server that night, took his order. Just coffee, black. For the next hour, he sat there, occasionally sipping his coffee, but mostly just watching. Not in an obvious way, but I caught him staring at me several times when I glanced over. Each time he'd quickly look down at his phone or out the window. Around 2:45 a.m. the phone rang. Everyone else had left except for him. I was restocking napkin dispensers, and the phone was right beside me, so I picked it up without thinking. "Hillcrest Diner, how can I help you?" That voice came through immediately. "Are you alone tonight, Michael?" Before I could hang up, he continued, "Look to your left." I turned instinctively and locked eyes with the man in the corner booth. He was staring directly at me, phone held to his ear, smiling in a way that made my skin crawl. Not a threatening smile, something worse. A knowing smile, like we shared some private joke. I hung up and turned away, pretending to organize something under the counter while my mind raced. I needed to get Brenda and Tony, tell them what was happening without alerting the guy. But before I could move, the man stood up and approached the counter. He placed a $5 bill down for his coffee. "Refills are free, you know," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He smiled again, that same unsettling smile. "I know, but good service deserves a tip." As he turned to leave, he paused and looked back at me. "You should answer your phone, Michael. It's rude to ignore calls." He walked out the front door, and I watched through the windows as he crossed the parking lot and disappeared into the darkness beyond the lights. The moment he was out of sight, I rushed to the kitchen and told Tony what had happened. We locked the doors, something we never do until closing, and I called the police. Brenda was visibly shaken when I explained the situation. She said the guy had barely spoken to her, just ordered his coffee with a nod and a point at the menu. The police arrived about 15 minutes later. 2 officers took my statement, while a third searched the perimeter of the building. They were concerned but also limited in what they could do. The man hadn't explicitly threatened me, hadn't tried to harm anyone, and was now gone. They took a description and promised to keep an eye on the diner for the rest of the night. After they left, we stayed locked down. Tony volunteered to stay with me until morning, and Brenda's boyfriend came to pick her up. I called the owner and explained what happened. He agreed to have someone cover my next night shift and said we'd install cameras the following week. Here's where it gets worse. At exactly 4 a.m., the phone rang again. Tony and I looked at each other. He nodded toward the phone. "Speaker," he mouthed. I hit the speaker button and answered without identifying the diner. "Hello? Michael." It was him. "I see your friends have left. Just you and the cook now, right?" I froze. How did he know? The diner has windows all around, but the parking lot was empty except for our cars, and we'd turned off most of the interior lights. "The police won't help you, Michael. They're busy with a 3-car pileup on the highway." He paused. I should know. I called it in. I hung up and immediately called 911. The dispatcher confirmed there had indeed been an accident reported on Highway 16, about 10 miles south. Officers were en route, including the patrol that had been checking on us periodically. Tony grabbed a knife from the kitchen. We turned off all the lights and moved to the storage room at the back of the diner, the only space without windows. For 2 hours we sat in silence, jumping at every creak and distant sound. The phone rang several more times. We let it go to voicemail. At 6 a.m., dawn finally broke. The morning crew arrived, confused to find the doors locked and the lights off. We let them in, explained a shortened version of what happened, and I called the police again. They sent an officer back, but with the accident and shift change, it had taken longer than usual. I was about to leave when I decided to check around the building first. That's when I found it. Just outside the bathroom window on the side of the building, a prepaid cell phone and wireless earbuds tossed in the bushes. The bathroom window was slightly ajar, not enough for someone to climb through, but enough to drop something out. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. He'd never been using his personal phone to call. He'd set up the burner phone in the bathroom, connected the earbuds, then returned to his seat to make the calls. That's why he seemed to know when I was alone or who was in the diner. He could see me the whole time. And when the police came, he had nothing incriminating on him because he'd already ditched the evidence. The police took the phone and earbuds as evidence, but I already knew they wouldn't find anything useful. This guy was too careful. I haven't worked a night shift since then. The owner installed security cameras the next day and hired 2 night managers, so nobody works alone. The police increased patrols around the diner for a couple of weeks, but they've since returned to normal rounds. The calls have stopped, at least at the diner. 2 nights ago, my personal cell phone rang at 3:24 a.m. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. No message was left. Last night it rang again. Same time exactly, 3:24 a.m. I blocked the number, but I know it won't matter. He'll find another way to call, another number, another phone. What terrifies me most isn't the calls themselves. It's the planning, the patience, the calculated effort this person put into getting inside my head. Who does that? Who picks a random diner manager to torment? Or was I not random at all? I've gone through my entire life trying to think of anyone I might have wronged, anyone who might have a grudge. Nothing comes to mind. I'm just an ordinary guy who managed to piss off someone extraordinarily disturbed. I keep replaying that night in my head. His face, his voice, that smile. I've started checking the locks 3-4 times before bed. I've looked into home security systems. I've even considered moving my family out of Oak Ridge altogether. My wife thinks I'm overreacting, that it was just some sicko who's moved on to his next target. I hope she's right. But last night, as I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my phone lit up with a text. Unknown number. Are you alone tonight, Michael? I immediately deleted it and turned off my phone. This morning, I went to the phone store and changed my number. I don't know what this guy wants from me or why he chose me. I don't know if he's still watching or if he's done with his little game. But I know one thing for certain. I'll never answer a phone the same way again. The diner feels different now. Those big windows that I once thought made the place feel open and welcoming now just feel like they're exposing us to whatever's out there in the dark. And every time I see someone sitting alone in that corner booth, I feel my heart start to race. I'm writing this down because I need someone else to know what happened. The police file just describes it as harassment, but it was so much more than that. It was an invasion. This person didn't just call me. He studied me, learned my patterns, figured out how to get under my skin in the most efficient way possible. And the worst part? I still have no idea who he is or what he wants. All I know is that somewhere out there someone has my name, my workplace, and now apparently my personal phone number. And for some reason, he's decided I'm worth the effort of tormenting. I'm not sleeping much these days. Every time the phone rings, I feel sick to my stomach. My wife answers all calls now. I've deleted all my social media accounts and asked friends not to tag me in photos or mention me online. Maybe I am overreacting. Maybe he's moved on. But I can't shake the feeling that he's still out there, watching and waiting. For what? I don't know. And that's the thing that keeps me up at night, not knowing what comes next. I've thought about sharing this for a long time. I guess I've been afraid people would think I'm crazy or making it up, but I need to get this off my chest. It happened 3 months ago and I still can't shake it. I managed Lowe's Diner, this small place on the outskirts of Millfield. Nothing fancy, just your typical greasy spoon with vinyl booths, a counter with those spinning stools, and a neon sign that flickers when it rains. Been working there for almost 7 years now, mostly night shifts. I'm used to the late hours. They actually became kind of comforting, the quiet, the routine, you know? That night started like any other. Tuesday in early February, cold as hell outside. We had our usual dinner rush, locals grabbing burgers, couple of truckers stopping for coffee and pie, the normal crowd. Things slowed down around 11, and by midnight our last customer had left. Just me and the cook, Miguel, finishing up. Miguel left around 12:15 after cleaning the kitchen. I told him I'd handle the rest, wiping down the tables, sweeping, counting the register, the usual closing stuff. I actually liked those moments alone in the diner, something peaceful about it after dealing with people all day. I was almost done with everything, just needed to check the bathrooms before locking up. Our bathrooms are at the back of the diner, past the kitchen. As I walked toward them, I noticed the men's room door was cracked open. Not wide, just slightly ajar. Now, I specifically remembered closing that door earlier. We always keep them closed when not in use. Old habit from my first boss who said it looked more professional. So seeing it open immediately felt wrong. Then I heard it. This faint rustling sound coming from inside, like someone shuffling around in there. And then this mumbling, this low muttering that I couldn't make out, but definitely human. My first thought was maybe someone had fallen asleep in there. Wouldn't be the first time some drunk guy passed out in our bathroom. So I called out, "Hello? We're closed now." The muttering stopped for a second, then continued, a bit louder. I still couldn't understand what they were saying, but something about it made the hair on my arms stand up. It didn't sound right. I pushed the door open a bit more. The bathroom only has 3 stalls and 2 urinals. From where I stood, I could see most of it in the mirror, and it looked empty except for the last stall at the end, which was closed. "Hey," I called again, trying to sound authoritative. "The diner's closed. You need to leave now." The muttering stopped completely. Just silence. I thought maybe they'd heard me this time, so I took a few steps in. That's when the stall door rattled violently, like someone had slammed against it from the inside. I jumped back, my heart suddenly racing. "Get out!" a man's voice growled from inside the stall. "Leave me alone! They're looking for me!" His voice was rough, almost hoarse, like he'd been yelling for hours. There was something desperate in it that made my stomach knot up. "Sir, I need you to come out," I said, trying to stay calm. "The diner is closed. I can call you a cab if you need—" "They're everywhere," he screamed, cutting me off. The stall door rattled again, harder this time. "Don't you see them? They're in the walls, in the fucking walls." I backed up toward the door. Whatever was happening, this guy wasn't just drunk. Something was seriously wrong with him. "They put things in my head," he continued, his voice dropping to an urgent whisper that somehow felt worse than the yelling. "Little machines, tiny cameras. I can feel them moving around in there." Then he started laughing, not normal laughter, this horrible broken sound that made my skin crawl. I wasn't about to play hero. I backed out of the bathroom, my hands shaking as I pulled the door closed. We have these old-school bathroom keys we use to lock them from the outside for cleaning. I fumbled with the key, dropping it once before managing to lock the door. The whole time, I could hear him in there, having what sounded like a conversation with multiple people, his voice changing as he seemed to argue with himself. Then he'd throw himself against the stall door again, with this sickening thud. I ran to the front counter where I'd left my phone and called 911. The dispatcher kept asking me questions I couldn't answer. Was he armed? Did he seem violent? How long had he been there? I had no idea. All I knew was that there was a man locked in my bathroom who seemed dangerously unstable. She told me officers were on their way, but it would take about 10 minutes since we're on the edge of town. 10 minutes never felt so long in my life. I stood near the front door, as far from the bathroom as possible, watching that hallway like I expected him to somehow bust through the locked door at any second. The sounds from the bathroom continued, sometimes quiet mutterings, sometimes violent crashes against the stall, sometimes desperate sobbing. At one point, he started screaming numbers in sequence, like he was counting something only he could see. 7, 13, 22, 47, 91. Over and over, getting louder each time. When the police finally arrived, 2 officers came in first. I explained the situation, my words tumbling out too fast. A 3rd officer waited outside. They asked me to stay by the front door while they approached the bathroom. I watched from a distance as they unlocked the door, one officer with his hand on his holster. They announced themselves, but the man just kept muttering those numbers. When they entered, I could still hear everything. Them identifying themselves again, asking him to come out of the stall, him responding with more incoherent rambling about them watching him. After some back and forth, I heard one officer say, "Sir, we're going to open this door now. We're here to help you." There was a crash, like the man had thrown himself against the stall door again. And then the officers were shouting commands. I couldn't see what was happening, but a minute later they emerged with him. I'll never forget how he looked. Maybe mid-30s, but it was hard to tell. His clothes were filthy, like he'd been wearing them for weeks. Dark hair matted with sweat. His eyes, God, his eyes were what got me. They were darting everywhere, never focusing on anything for more than a second, like he was tracking invisible insects swarming around him. As they led him past me toward the door, he suddenly locked eyes with me. For just a moment, they stopped their frantic movement and focused directly on me. He smiled, not a friendly smile, but something knowing and terrible. "You'll see them, too," he whispered as they guided him past. "Once they know you can see them, they'll come for you next." The officers got him outside to their car. I saw them talking to him, trying to calm him down. One of them came back in and explained they thought he was having some kind of psychiatric episode. They were taking him to the hospital for evaluation. "Does he have any ID?" I asked. "Nothing on him," the officer replied. "No wallet, no phone, just the clothes on his back." He asked if I wanted to file a report for trespassing, but I said no. The guy clearly needed help, not charges. The officer took my statement anyway and said they'd follow up if needed. After they left, I had to finish closing up. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I checked every corner of the diner, looking behind the counter, in the kitchen, the supply closet, everywhere. I don't know what I was looking for. Maybe proof that the man had been hiding somewhere before I found him? Maybe reassurance that no one else was there? When I finally left, I double and triple checked the locks. The entire drive home, I kept checking my rear-view mirror, this new paranoia suddenly taking root. The next day, I went to my boss and insisted on security changes. We got new deadbolts for the bathrooms, better exterior lighting, and a basic security camera system. Small stuff, but it helped a little. The police never contacted me again about the man. I called the station a week later just to ask if he was okay, but they wouldn't give me any information due to privacy laws. Just said the matter had been resolved. I still work nights at the diner. I still do the closing routine. But everything's different now. I keep my phone in my pocket at all times. I check the bathrooms throughout the night, never waiting until closing. I peek under every stall before entering. I'm constantly looking over my shoulder. The thing that haunts me most is that I don't know how long he was in there before I found him. The bathroom had been cleaned during the afternoon shift. At some point, he must have slipped in unnoticed. How long was he hiding in that stall? Hours. What was he waiting for? Sometimes when I'm alone in the diner at night, I swear I can hear that muttering again, just at the edge of my hearing. And sometimes, when I'm checking the bathroom before locking up, I find myself counting out loud. 7, 13, 22, 47, 91. I don't know why. Those numbers mean nothing to me, but they come out anyway. Last week, I was wiping down the counter after close, and I caught my reflection in the chrome napkin dispenser. For just a second, just one brief moment, my eyes were darting around, never settling, just like his had been. I dropped the rag and ran outside, stood in the parking lot just breathing until I felt normal again. I tried to tell myself it was just a mentally ill man who happened to wander into our diner. That's the rational explanation. But I can't shake this feeling that there was something else going on, something worse. When he looked at me that night and said they'd come for me next, part of me believed him. And now, every night when I lock up, I wonder if tonight's the night I'll see what he saw. I don't think I'll ever feel safe in that diner again. I never thought I'd be writing something like this. Even now, my hands are shaking as I type this out. I keep glancing out my window, checking the security cameras on my phone. I guess I should start from the beginning. 3 months ago, my wife Jade and I finally closed on our dream home in Raleigh. After years of saving, working overtime, and living in a cramped apartment with our 2 kids, Tyler, 8, and Zoe, 6, we finally had our own place with a yard. It was a beautiful craftsman-style home with dark blue siding, white trim, and a front porch I'd always imagined sitting on during summer evenings. The backyard was spacious enough for the kids to run around, and there was even a maple tree perfect for a tire swing. Moving day was exhausting but exhilarating. The kids were running from room to room, claiming spaces and talking about how they wanted to decorate. Jade couldn't stop smiling as she arranged and rearranged furniture. That night, after putting the kids to bed, Jade and I sat on our new porch with a bottle of wine, looking at the stars, feeling like we'd finally made it. The first week was a blur of unpacking, meeting neighbors, and making small improvements to the house. Mr. Peterson from next door brought over a homemade casserole. The Michaels family across the street invited the kids to play with their son, and Mrs. Rivera from 2 doors down gave us a list of local contractors and handymen. Everything felt perfect, too perfect, I guess. It started on a Tuesday night. We'd been in the house for exactly 8 days. I was in the middle of a deep sleep when I heard 3 distinct knocks on our front door. I checked the time, 2:17 a.m. My heart immediately started racing. Who the hell knocks on someone's door at this hour? I crept downstairs, grabbed the baseball bat I'd propped by the door, a habit from our old apartment in a less safe neighborhood, and peeked through the peephole. Nothing. I opened the door cautiously, bat raised, but our front porch was empty. The street was silent and still. I chalked it up to maybe a branch hitting the door or my imagination and went back to bed. The next morning, I found a folded piece of paper on our welcome mat. Opening it revealed a handwritten note. "This house remembers." That's all it said. I showed it to Jade, and we laughed it off as some weird prank by neighborhood kids, or maybe a misdelivered note meant for someone else. But then it happened again the next night, and the night after that. Each time, knocks at odd hours, and each morning, a new note. "You don't belong here. It misses me. I'm always watching." By the 5th night, I wasn't laughing anymore. I told Jade we should call the police, but she was hesitant. What are we going to tell them? That someone's leaving weird notes? They'll think we're crazy. So instead, I installed a doorbell camera I'd been meaning to set up anyway. That night I stayed up late, watching the live feed on my phone. Around 1:45 a.m., I saw a figure approach our door. It was a woman with long, dark hair, wearing what looked like a nightgown. She stared directly into the camera for a full minute before placing something on the ground and walking away, disappearing into the darkness beyond our porch light's reach. I raced downstairs and opened the door, hoping to catch her, but she was gone. On our mat lay another note. "This house is mine." The handwriting was shaky, angrier than before. I showed Jade the footage and the note in the morning. She was clearly rattled. "Maybe we should talk to the previous owners," she suggested. "Find out if there's something about this house we should know." I called our realtor later that day, trying to sound casual as I asked for the contact information of the previous owner. She was hesitant at first, but gave me his number after I made up a story about finding some of his mail. His name was Robert Blackwood, and he agreed to meet me for coffee that afternoon. He was a man in his mid-50s, conservatively dressed, with tired eyes. When I showed him the notes, his face drained of color. "It's Vanessa," he said quietly. "My ex-wife." He explained that they'd bought the house together 8 years ago. After their divorce 3 years back, He got the house in the settlement. Vanessa had never accepted it. She'd developed what he called an unhealthy attachment to the property, insisting it was her forever home and that she'd bonded with its soul. I had to get a restraining order last year, he admitted. She kept showing up, demanding to be let in, saying the house was calling to her. I thought selling and moving across town would end it. I'm sorry, I should have disclosed this, but I honestly thought she'd move on once I was gone. That night, I installed additional security cameras around our property. Jade and I decided not to tell the kids what was happening. They were just starting to feel settled, and we didn't want to frighten them. But we did institute a new safety rule that they weren't to answer the door without a parent present. 3 nights passed without incident, and I started to hope that maybe seeing the cameras had scared Vanessa off. Then Jade woke me at 11:30 p.m., her face pale in the blue light of her phone. "Marcus, look," she whispered, showing me the security app. On the screen, a woman stood at the edge of our backyard, partially hidden by shadows, just watching the house. She was perfectly still, her long hair moving slightly in the breeze. I called the police. By the time they arrived, she was gone. The officers took a report but didn't seem overly concerned. "No actual threat has been made," one officer told me, "and standing on public property isn't trespassing." The next morning I went outside to find all of Jade's newly planted flowers uprooted and scattered across the lawn. Another note was pinned under a garden stone. "I need to come home." I called Robert again. "You need to talk to her," I insisted. "Tell her to stop this." "I can't," he said, his voice cracking. "I haven't spoken to her in months. She's not well. Last I heard, she was in and out of psychiatric care." That afternoon, I installed new locks on all our doors and windows. I also called a security company to set up a full alarm system, but they couldn't come for another week. That night, I barely slept, constantly checking the camera feeds on my phone. The next morning, I found deep scratches across our front door, like someone had taken a key or knife to it. Another note, "Let me in." Jade wanted to take the kids and stay with her mother, but I stubbornly refused to be driven from our home. "We've worked too hard for this," I told her. "I'm not letting some unstable woman scare us away." I regret that decision now. 2 nights later, we were watching a movie with the kids when a rock came crashing through our living room window. Glass shattered everywhere. Zoe screamed. Tyler started crying. Attached to the rock was a note, "Leave or you'll regret it." This time when I called the police, they took it more seriously. They increased patrols in our neighborhood, but said without catching her in the act, there wasn't much else they could do. I showed them Robert's information and explained about Vanessa, but they said they needed more to go on. That night, we all slept in the master bedroom. The kids curled up between us. I kept the baseball bat beside the bed and had the security app open all night. Around 3 a.m., I caught a glimpse of movement on the side camera, just a shadow really. But when I checked other angles, there was nothing there. The next morning, I took the kids to school myself instead of letting them wait for the bus. When I returned home, Jade was standing in the driveway, staring at our front door. From a distance, I couldn't tell what she was looking at. As I got closer, I saw it. A kitchen knife stabbed into our door, pinning a note that read, "Next time it won't be the door." That was it. I called the police again, this time demanding action. They finally agreed to take our case more seriously and promised to increase patrols around our home. I also called an emergency locksmith to reinforce our doors and windows. That night, we were too terrified to sleep. Every creak of the house, every rustle of leaves outside sent my heart racing. Around midnight, one of the motion sensors triggered an alert. I checked the app to see Vanessa. I was sure it was her now, walking slowly around the perimeter of our backyard, running her hand along the fence like she was caressing it. I called 911 immediately. "She's here right now," I whispered into the phone, watching her movements on my screen. "Please hurry." The dispatcher told me to stay inside, lock all doors, and wait for officers to arrive. Those 15 minutes were the longest of my life. I watched as Vanessa completed her circuit of our yard, then settled into a crouching position behind our shed. When the police cars pulled up, their lights flashing, I saw her dart toward the back of our property. 2 officers went around back while another came to our front door. I showed him the live feed, where his colleagues were now searching the area with flashlights. "We got her!" came a shout from the backyard. I went outside with the officer to see Vanessa being handcuffed. She was thinner than she'd appeared on camera, with wild eyes and unkempt hair. She didn't struggle or yell. She just kept looking at our house with an expression of pure longing that chilled me to the bone. "This house is not yours," she said quietly as they led her past me. "It will never be yours." One of the officers handed me a notebook they'd found in her possession. Flipping through it, my blood ran cold. She'd been watching us for weeks, documenting our comings and goings, our routines, when the kids left for school, when Jade went grocery shopping, when I took out the trash. There were detailed notes about our habits, along with rambling passages about how the house called to her and how she needed to cleanse it of our presence. The police took Vanessa into custody. I later learned she was charged with harassment, trespassing, vandalism, and making threats. Robert helped them build their case, providing evidence of her previous behavior. We got a restraining order against her. It's been a month since her arrest. We've added more security features to our home: motion sensor lights, better cameras, a state-of-the-art alarm system. We've had the locks changed again. We've repaired the window and the front door. But some things can't be fixed so easily. Tyler has nightmares almost every night. Zoe refuses to sleep alone. Jade jumps at every unexpected sound. And me? I check the security cameras obsessively, sometimes waking up multiple times a night just to make sure she's not there. The neighbors have been supportive. Mrs. Rivera brings dinner once a week. Mr. Peterson keeps an eye out for anything unusual. The Michaels family invites the kids over regularly, trying to give them a sense of normalcy. But our dream home doesn't feel like a dream anymore. Sometimes I catch Jade looking at real estate listings on her laptop. I don't blame her. Part of me wants to move too. Yesterday, I was mowing the lawn when I noticed something carved into the bark of our maple tree. It looked old, weathered, like it had been there for years, but I swear it wasn't there when we moved in. 2 simple words: still mine. Maybe it was always there and I just never noticed. Maybe it's new. Maybe I'm losing my mind. Tonight, as I sit here typing this, I can't shake the feeling that I'm being watched. The house is quiet except for the occasional creak. Normal house sounds, I tell myself. But then again, I keep thinking about what Vanessa said about the house calling to her. I know she's in custody. I know she can't hurt us, but her words echo in my head. This house is not yours. It will never be yours. The worst part, sometimes, in the dead of night, when the wind blows just right and the shadows move across our walls, I almost believe her. I still can't sleep without checking every door, window, and vent in my house, 3 times minimum. It's been 8 months since everything happened, but the paranoia hasn't faded at all. If anything, it's gotten worse. I'm writing this because my therapist thinks it might help me process what happened, but honestly, I'm not sure anything will make this better. Last September, I finally took the plunge and bought my first property, a duplex in Syracuse. I'd been saving for years, waiting for the right opportunity, and this place seemed perfect. It was a 1930s build with good bones, decent neighborhood, and the clincher. I could live in the upstairs unit while renting out the lower apartment for extra income. The previous owner had passed away, and their kids just wanted to offload it quickly. At 40, I was tired of throwing money away on rent, and with my stable IT job, the mortgage was totally manageable. The first few weeks were exhausting but exciting. I moved into the upstairs unit, which needed minimal work, just some fresh paint and minor repairs. The downstairs apartment needed more love, but nothing major. New kitchen cabinets, updated bathroom fixtures, refinished hardwood floors. I was spending my evenings and weekends working down there, planning to have it rental ready by Christmas. I think it was about 3 weeks after moving in when I first noticed something off. I was up late working on some network issues for a client, the joy of remote IT support, when I heard what sounded like footsteps downstairs. Not loud, just the unmistakable sound of someone walking carefully across a floor. My first thought was a raccoon or maybe a mouse problem, so I grabbed my phone flashlight and went down to check. Nothing. Every door and window was locked tight, just as I'd left them. The half-renovated apartment was empty, with my tools and materials sitting exactly where I'd placed them earlier. I chalked it up to an old house settling or pipes expanding, the usual explanations. But then it happened again the next night, and the night after, always between 1 and 3 a.m. Sometimes it sounded like footsteps, other times like someone slowly dragging something across the floor. Once, I swear I heard what sounded like a cabinet door closing. Each time I'd go down to investigate, and each time I'd find nothing disturbed. I started to question myself. Was I so tired from working my day job plus renovating that my mind was playing tricks? Was I hearing the neighbors next door? I even set up my phone to record audio one night, but when I listened back, the sounds were too faint to be conclusive. By late October, the noises had become more frequent and, honestly, more brazen. One night I distinctly heard a chair scrape across the kitchen floor downstairs. It wasn't subtle or easily mistaken for anything else. It was clearly a chair being moved. I was frozen in bed for a good minute before finding the courage to grab the baseball bat I'd started keeping nearby. This time when I went downstairs, something was different. Nothing obvious at first glance, but as I stood in the kitchen, goosebumps rising on my arms, I noticed one of the dining chairs wasn't quite where I'd left it. Not dramatically moved, but enough that I was sure it had been shifted about a foot from where it had been when I finished work earlier. I called the police. They came, did a thorough check, found nothing. No signs of forced entry, no footprints, no evidence anyone had been there. The officer suggested it might be the renovation materials settling, or even vibrations from nearby traffic causing things to shift slightly. He was nice about it, but I could tell he thought I was overreacting. After they left, I installed new deadbolts on all exterior doors that same day. I even put a motion-sensing camera in the downstairs apartment, pointed at the front door. For a couple of nights, things were quiet, and I started to think maybe the police officer was right. Then one night in early November, I was jolted awake by a loud thump directly below my bedroom. It was nearly 2 a.m. I grabbed my phone to check the camera feed, but it showed nothing. No movement at the front door or in the main living area of the downstairs unit. yet I could still hear faint movements below. I decided on a different approach. Instead of going downstairs immediately, I quietly went to my front window and watched the property's entrance. If someone was coming and going, I'd catch them. I sat there for almost 2 hours, hearing occasional noises from downstairs, but seeing no one enter or leave the building. Around 4 a.m., I heard that same chair scraping sound again. That's when something clicked in my brain. I'd been renovating the utility room earlier that week and remembered seeing an access panel to the crawl space under the house. It was about 3 feet by 2 feet set into the floor. I hadn't paid much attention to it before since it wasn't part of my immediate renovation plans. My heart pounding, I went down to the first floor again, this time heading straight for the utility room. The metal access panel was slightly ajar, with disturbed dust around its edges. Someone had definitely moved it recently, and it wasn't me. I didn't open it. Instead, I backed out of the room, went upstairs, locked my door, and pushed my dresser in front of it. I spent the rest of the night wide awake, jumping at every sound, waiting for daylight. The next morning, I called my buddy Marco, who works construction. I didn't tell him exactly what I suspected, just that I needed help checking out the crawl space under my house for possible structural issues. He came over around noon. "Dude, you look like shit," were his first words when he saw me. I hadn't slept, and my nerves were completely shot. "Yeah, not sleeping great in the new place," I muttered, leading him to the utility room. Marco brought a heavy-duty flashlight and some basic tools. When we opened the access panel, he went in first. I'll never forget the way his body language changed as he crawled further in. How he suddenly froze, then slowly turned his head to look back at me, his face drained of color. "Ethan, you need to call the cops right now." I think I knew what he'd found before I even looked, but seeing it with my own eyes was so much worse than I'd imagined. The crawl space, which ran beneath the entire duplex, had been turned into a makeshift living area. There were blankets arranged like a bed, a pillow, food wrappers, water bottles, and even a small box of personal items, including a toothbrush and some medications. The space was cramped, maybe 3 feet high at most, but someone had clearly been living down there. But the worst part wasn't the living area itself. It was what we found as we followed the crawl space further, a carefully cut opening in the ceiling that led directly into a closet in the downstairs apartment. The cut had been made from below, and when closed, it would be completely hidden behind the hanging coats in the closet. Someone had created a secret entrance into my house. I felt sick. While I'd been sleeping upstairs, someone had been living beneath my feet, coming and going through the downstairs apartment as they pleased. All those noises, they were real. Someone was actually there. Marco and I backed out of the crawl space, and I immediately called 911. While waiting for the police, we discovered 2 more access points that had been created, one into a kitchen cabinet and another into a hallway linen closet. All had been carefully cut and concealed from the apartment side. The intruder could enter the living space from multiple locations without using any exterior doors or windows. The police arrived within minutes. They approached the situation with much more urgency than my previous call, bringing several officers and treating my duplex like an active crime scene. They advised me to leave while they conducted their search, but I refused to go far, sitting in my car across the street, watching my house with a growing sense of violation and disbelief. After about an hour, an officer approached my car and asked me to come back inside. They hadn't found anyone in the crawl space or apartment, but they wanted to discuss what they had discovered. The detective explained that based on the setup and the items found, Someone had likely been living there for months, possibly even before I purchased the property. They set up surveillance that night, positioning plainclothes officers in unmarked cars around the property. I stayed with Marco at his place, unable to face sleeping in my house, knowing what was beneath it. At 1:42 a.m., I got the call from the detective. They'd caught him. A man in his 50s had approached the side of the house carrying a small bag of groceries, made his way to a concealed entrance to the crawl space that neither Marco nor I had discovered, a loose piece of siding that could be removed without tools, and was arrested as he attempted to enter. I went to the station the next morning to give an additional statement. The detective told me the man's name was Gerald Keller. He claimed the duplex was still his home and that he had never left. Records showed no connection between Keller and the property. The previous owner had been an elderly woman named Margaret Wilson, who had owned the duplex for over 30 years. Keller had previous arrests for trespassing and petty theft, along with a history of untreated mental illness. The most disturbing revelation came when they showed me items recovered from the crawl space. Among them was a notebook filled with detailed observations about my daily routine, when I left for work, when I came home, what rooms I used at what times, even what I ate for dinner some nights. He'd been watching me, studying me like some kind of science experiment. There were also small trinkets clearly taken from my apartment. A coaster from my coffee table, a spare key I thought I'd misplaced, and even a sock I'd assumed was lost in the laundry. In the weeks that followed, I threw myself into securing the property. I sealed the crawl space with welded metal plating. I installed new locks, security cameras, motion sensors, and an alarm system throughout both units. I had Marco and another construction friend help inspect every inch of both apartments for any other hidden access points. But no amount of security measures could fix what had been broken inside me. My sense of safety, of privacy, of control over my own home, it was shattered beyond repair. Every creak in the floorboards, every random noise in the night sent me into a panic. I couldn't stop imagining him down there, silently observing me through the vents or tiny gaps in the flooring. How many times had he been just feet away from me while I slept, or worked, or ate, separated only by a thin layer of wood? The downstairs apartment remains empty. I can't bring myself to rent it to someone else, knowing what happened. And I can't live in a place where every sound makes me question whether I'm truly alone. I've started looking at properties in other states, as far from Syracuse as I can get. The duplex that was supposed to be my investment in the future became a prison of fear. The worst part is knowing that for weeks, maybe months, my private space was never truly mine. While I was living my life, someone else was living a shadow existence beneath my feet, watching, waiting, invading every moment I thought I was alone. I still don't know what his intentions were. Was he just homeless and looking for shelter? Was he planning something worse? The police said I was lucky, that situations like this sometimes end much more violently. But I don't feel lucky. I feel violated in a way I can't put into words, so now I check the locks 3 times before bed. I look under furniture, behind doors, inside closets. I've become obsessed with knowing exactly where every sound in my house comes from. And sometimes when it's very quiet at night, I swear I can still hear him down there, moving silently beneath the floorboards, waiting for me to let my guard down again. I never considered myself superstitious. I've taught second grade for 6 years and pride myself on being practical and level-headed. Kids can sense fear, you know. So I've always been the type to check under beds for monsters with a smile, knowing full well there's nothing there. But what happened in that house in Tampa last summer, I still can't explain it rationally, even though I've tried. God, have I tried? After saving for nearly 4 years, I was beyond excited to finally move out of my cramped apartment complex with paper-thin walls and into a real house. The rental market in Tampa is brutal, but I found this adorable 1950s bungalow with white shutters and a front porch swing that immediately felt like home. The landlord was this older gentleman who seemed almost too eager to rent it out, but I chalked it up to my excellent credit score and stable teaching job. Moving in was a dream. July 4th weekend, 2022. I remember sweating bullets carrying boxes inside while my friends helped, but I didn't care. This was my place. I spent that first week painting an accent wall in the living room this gorgeous teal color, arranging my books by color, don't judge, and planting some herbs in the small garden out back. The neighbors seemed nice enough, mostly keeping to themselves. I even got a welcome to the neighborhood pie from the elderly couple next door. The first weird thing happened about 3 weeks after moving in. I was grading summer school assignments on the couch when the living room light started flickering. Not just a minor flicker, it was pulsing, almost like it was breathing. I figured it was just an old bulb, so I changed it the next day. But it happened again that night, and the night after. Then it spread. The hallway light started first, then the kitchen, always in that order. Hallway, kitchen, living room. Never during the day, always after 10 p.m. when the house was quiet. I started documenting it in the Notes app on my phone, thinking maybe there was a pattern related to power usage in the neighborhood or something logical like that. By early August, I was getting genuinely annoyed. As a teacher prepping for the new school year, I needed to focus. So I called an electrician, this guy named Mike with stellar reviews online. He spent nearly 3 hours checking every outlet, switch, and circuit in the house. He even went into the crawl space under the house, which I couldn't have paid me to do. "Ma'am, I don't know what to tell you," he said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Your wiring is in excellent condition, especially for a house this age. Better than most new builds, honestly." I must have looked defeated because he quickly added, "Sometimes older homes just have quirks. Could be electromagnetic interference from outside, maybe a neighbor's appliance." But it wasn't a quirk, and it wasn't the neighbors. The flickering started changing. It wasn't random anymore. It was directional. It's hard to explain without sounding completely unhinged, but the lights would dim in a way that seemed to pull my attention toward specific areas of the house. First, it was the hallway closet. The hallway light would flicker, then completely shut off except for a thin beam that illuminated just the closet door. I checked the closet multiple times. Nothing unusual, just my winter coats, barely used in Florida, some board games, and cleaning supplies. Then it was the corner of the living room where I had a small reading nook set up. The living room lights would dim everywhere except that corner, which stayed unnaturally bright. I rearranged the furniture, thinking maybe something was blocking a vent or interfering with the electrical somehow. Nothing changed, but the attic door, that's where things got truly terrifying. The house had one of those pull-down ladder attics in the hallway ceiling. I hadn't even been up there yet. The landlord mentioned it was just storage space, and I didn't have much to store. Every single night, without fail, the light directly beneath the attic door would flicker violently. Sometimes it would go on for hours. I started sleeping with my bedroom door closed, but I could see the light pulsing underneath the door crack. By this point, I was barely sleeping. I'd wake up multiple times each night, heart racing, convinced I heard footsteps overhead. I told myself it was just the house settling, or maybe raccoons had somehow gotten into the attic. I even called pest control, but they found no evidence of animals. I started avoiding telling people about it. When colleagues asked how I was settling into my new place, I'd smile and say everything was perfect. My best friend Amy came over for dinner one night, and when the kitchen light started its now familiar dance, I casually mentioned that I needed to get the wiring checked. She didn't seem to notice how erratic the flickering was, or how my hands shook as I served dinner. "Have you explored the whole house yet?" she asked between bites of pasta. These old places sometimes have hidden nooks or cool architectural details. I forced a laugh. "Pretty much. Still haven't checked out the attic, though." "Ooh, you should. My aunt found vintage Christmas ornaments worth hundreds in her attic." The thought of going up there made my stomach turn, but I nodded anyway. That night was the worst yet. I woke up at exactly 3:17 a.m. I remember checking my phone. To complete darkness. Not just normal nighttime darkness, the kind of pitch black that feels solid, like you could reach out and touch it. My bedside lamp wouldn't turn on. Neither would my phone's flashlight. The power must have gone out. Then I heard it. The unmistakable sound of the attic ladder slowly being pulled down. I froze, paralyzed with fear, straining to hear over the sound of my own panicked breathing. There was no creaking of footsteps, no intruder's voice, just the soft groan of the ladder extending to the floor. I don't know where I found the courage, but something in me snapped. I was done being afraid in my own home. I fumbled in my bedside drawer for the flashlight I kept for emergencies, half expecting it wouldn't work either, but it clicked on with a weak yellow beam. Clutching my phone, useless without power but somehow comforting, I crept toward my bedroom door. The hallway beyond was cloaked in shadow, but I could make out the attic ladder, fully extended to the floor. I stood there for what felt like forever, listening. The house was completely silent. That's when the bedroom light above me flickered back to life, just once, blindingly bright, before plunging back into darkness. Then the bathroom light, then the hallway. Each flicker illuminated the path to the attic, like some twisted runway lights guiding me forward. "This ends tonight," I whispered to myself, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. With my flashlight aimed upward, I approached the ladder. Each step creaked under my weight as I climbed, my free hand white-knuckled on the wooden rails. The air grew noticeably colder as I neared the top. The attic was exactly what you'd expect, low-ceilinged, dusty, with exposed insulation and beams. Cobwebs clung to my hair and face as I pulled myself up onto the plywood flooring. In the center hung a single bare light bulb on a chain. As if sensing my presence, it flickered weakly, casting bizarre, dancing shadows across the walls before dying completely. My flashlight beam looked feeble in the vast darkness. I swept it across piles of cardboard boxes, an old dress form, and what looked like holiday decorations. Nothing unusual, nothing threatening, just forgotten belongings. That's when I heard it. A soft sound, like fabric moving across wood. It came from the far corner of the attic, beyond where my flashlight could penetrate the darkness. I aimed my beam toward the sound, but saw only more boxes and shadows. I took a step forward, and the floorboard beneath me groaned loudly. The sound stopped immediately. Then something moved at the edge of my flashlight beam. Just a subtle shift of shadow, but I wasn't imagining it. My light caught something pale disappearing behind a stack of boxes. The temperature dropped so suddenly I could see my breath clouding in front of my face. The flashlight in my hand began to flicker, mirroring the pattern I'd grown to dread from the house lights. I backed up toward the attic entrance, unwilling to turn my back on whatever was hiding in the corner. My heel hit nothing but air as I misjudged the distance to the ladder opening. I stumbled, nearly falling backward through the hatch. As I fought to regain my balance, my flashlight beam swung wildly across the attic, and for just a split second, it illuminated a figure standing directly in front of me. I couldn't tell you if it was male or female. It wasn't quite solid, more like a dense shadow with vaguely human features. But the eyes, God, the eyes were unmistakable. They reflected my flashlight beam like an animal's would, 2 pinpoints of light in a featureless face. I screamed and lost my footing completely. Tumbling backward down the ladder, I hit the hallway floor hard, knocking the wind out of myself. My flashlight clattered away, rolling down the hall until it hit the wall, its beam now pointing at nothing. Gasping for breath, I scrambled to my feet and slammed the attic door shut. The overhead lights in the hallway burst to life, all at once, blazing brighter than I'd ever seen them. Then, each one in succession, exploded with a pop like gunshots, showering me with tiny shards of glass. I ran to my bedroom, grabbed my phone, keys, and wallet, and fled the house in my pajamas, not even stopping to put on shoes. I spent the rest of the night in my car in a 24-hour Walmart parking lot, shaking and crying and trying to convince myself I hadn't seen what I'd seen. By dawn, I'd made up my mind. I wasn't going back inside except to get my essential belongings, and I wasn't doing it alone. I called Amy and another friend, making up some story about a massive cockroach infestation that the landlord refused to address. They helped me pack my clothes, important documents, and a few sentimental items. I let them think I was being dramatic about bugs. It was better than the truth. I returned the keys to my landlord that same day. He didn't seem surprised. He didn't even ask why I was leaving so suddenly or try to keep my security deposit. He just nodded and took the keys, avoiding eye contact. "Did you know?" I blurted out as he turned to leave. "Did you know there was something wrong with that house?" He hesitated just long enough to confirm my suspicions. "I don't know what you're talking about, Ms. Parker. Houses settle. Wiring gets old." "The lights," I started, "are probably just outdated," he finished for me. "I'll have them replaced before the next tenant moves in." I wanted to warn whoever that next tenant might be, but how? What would I even say? Watch out for the ghost that communicates through light fixtures? I'd sound deranged. It's been over a year now. I'm back in an apartment complex, and I've convinced myself on most days that there was a logical explanation for everything. Maybe there was carbon monoxide in the house. Maybe I was sleepwalking or hallucinating from stress and lack of sleep, but I still sleep with a nightlight. I still flinch when a bulb flickers, even momentarily. And sometimes, when I'm alone at night, I swear I can hear the soft sound of fabric moving across wood just beyond my bedroom door. I never found out what was in that attic. Part of me never wants to know, but another part wonders if it's still there, waiting for the next person who will follow the flickering lights up that ladder into the darkness.